Chapter 1902 Overwhelming DPS. Chapter 1902 Overwhelming DPS. Crap! Just how high is his strength attribute? Hunting Blade, who was currently prepared to close in on the Void Serpent, could not help his surprise when he looked at Kola. He could not bring himself to believe that Kola had actually managed to offset the power of the Void Serpent's tail strike. Although he was currently equipped in the Dark Corrosion set, he wouldn't have had the strength to offset the Void Serpent's attack without activating a Berserk skill. He would only have been able to receive the attack head-on. The Void Snake's simple, physical attack had deformed its surroundings to such an extent. Its strength was so great that the resulting shockwave had sent the 5 Tier 2 MTs near Kola flying back over a dozen yards. The party of healers, who stood roughly 30 yards away from Kola, also nearly lost their footing. While offsetting a monster's attack was easy for expert players, the precondition for doing so was for the strength of both sides to be roughly equal. If a player tried to defend against an attack that carried strength far superior to their own, they would either go flying or get crushed on the spot. Yet, despite Kola not having activated a Berserk skill, he had managed to offset the Void Snake's attack. Kola's strength was simply extraordinary. Meanwhile, Unyielding Heart, who stood a short distance away from the Void Serpent, was similarly shocked by this outcome. Although he had known that Kola possessed frightening attributes since the Eclipse Throne raid, Kola was like a completely different person compared to back then. If Kola went to raid the Eclipse Throne right now, the dungeon raid would definitely be a piece of cake. Heal Kola! Everyone else, move according to the plan once Kola stabilizes his aggro. Shifeng instructed through the team chat after seeing Kola arrive before the Void Serpent. Shifeng did not find Kola's performance surprising even in the slightest. After all, Kola was equipped with not only a fragmented legendary shield but also a 6-piece level 70 fine gold set. Equipment for him to be able to tank a level 60 world boss was very normal. Of course, Kola was still far from capable of dealing with the normal level 80 Flame Demon King. He would be able to tank the level 80 world boss all by himself only if he activated a Berserk skill. After hearing Shifeng's reminder, the healer party promptly snapped out of their daze and started healing Kola and the others. In the meantime, the 9 100-man DPS teams slowly closed in on the Void Serpent from all sides. The Void Serpent was a world boss known for its single-target offensive capabilities. Only with an extremely powerful MT would players have a chance when raiding it. After Kola stabilized his aggro on the Void Serpent, the majority of the team started launching attacks at the world boss. The melee players struck at the Void Serpent's sides, while the ranged players mercilessly bombarded the Void Serpent's head with spells and arrows, using their attacks to disrupt the boss's vision. With several hundred players attacking the Void Serpent simultaneously, a series of damages rapidly appeared above the boss's head. -6,064. -7,348. -5,541. Practically everyone's attacks dealt damage in the thousands, an outcome that rendered many people speechless. Why is this boss's defense so high? Unyielding Heart frowned involuntarily upon seeing everyone's damage. Even he had barely dealt over -10,000 damage after using a Tier 2 skill. Compared to other mythic bosses he had fought against before, the Void Serpent's defense was significantly superior. As a Tier 2 Berserker, when he fought against an ordinary mythic boss, his Tier 2 skills could easily deal around -30,000 damage. With their team's overall DPS, they would most likely take a very long time to kill the Void Serpent. After attacking for 5 seconds, they had barely managed to chip away a little over 1% of the Void Serpent's HP. However, when the world boss's battle recovery kicked in, its HP actually reverted to full. What? Illusory Words could not help but be surprised when she saw this situation, wondering what the Void Serpent had just done to recover so much HP. While everyone in the team was puzzled by this situation, Shifeng knew exactly what was going on. This was the effect of the Void Serpent's self-healing passive skill, which doubled its battle recovery. In other words, the Void Serpent regenerated 2% of its HP every 5 seconds. This boss also had another passive skill, called Void Body, which halved the damage it received and reduced chances of critical hits occurring by 70%. These two passive skills made the Void Serpent extremely difficult to deal with. If a team lacked DPS, it would only be slowly whittled to death. "Aqua, you guys can start attacking now," Sherfong said to Zero Wing's main force members, who had arrived behind the Void Serpent. "Understood." Aqua Rose promptly commanded Zero Wing's main force to attack. At this moment, the advantage and attributes Zero Wing's main force members possess revealed itself. Every one of them dealt at least -8,000 damage with their attacks. In the case of Aqua Rose, Flying Shadow, Shadow Sword, and Blackie, their attacks delivered at least -15,000 damage. Occasionally, Aqua Rose would use a powerful water-type spell and inflict over -20,000 damage on the world boss. As for Gentle Snow, Fire Dance, Zhao Yueru, and Alluring Summer, every one of their attacks reaped a minimum of -20,000 from the boss's HP. Occasionally, they would use a powerful skill that wreaked around -40,000 damage. Moreover, none of these damages were due to critical hits. "How are they dealing so much damage? Even when I used a Tier 2 curse, I only managed to deal around -13,000 damage. How are they dealing over -40,000 damage with normal Tier 2 spells? Crap! Just what kind of equipment are they using?" The members of the two super first-rate guilds found this situation unbelievable. They were all experts of super first-rate guilds. Quite a few of them were even refinement realm experts. Although they were not the strongest in their respective guilds, they were still in the upper ranks. If placed in a first-rate guild, they would undoubtedly rank at the very top. Due to Zero Wing's main force taking action, 3 distinct tiers immediately formed in the team's DPS counter. The first tier was occupied by humanoid monsters like Gentle Snow. The second tier was occupied by Aqua Rose, Shadow Sword, Flying Shadow, Unyielding Heart, Long Soul, Dawnmaster, and other peak experts. Finally, the third tier would consist of players like themselves. Moreover, the gaps between each tier were so massive that there was simply no comparison between them. Meanwhile, due to Zero Wing's main force members joining in on the attack, the Void Serpent's HP finally started decreasing. Even so, the decline was still extremely slow. 99%, 98%, 97%. After several minutes of battle, the Void Serpent's HP finally fell to 85%, its first HP bar emptied. Suddenly, the Void Serpent let loose an angry roar. "Irritating ants! Turn to dust!" In the next moment, the Void Serpent incanted. "Children of the Void, breath of the wild wind, sword of the sharp blade! Turn into my hands and rend everything apart! Everyone, pay attention to dodging! Do not try to receive the attack, no matter what!" Sherfong shouted hurriedly when he saw the Void Serpent starting to cast a spell. After the Void Serpent spent 3 seconds chanting, Void Blades suddenly appeared in the sky and rained down on the ground, covering a 200-yard radius around the boss. For a time, countless Void Blades bombarded the vicinity of the Void Serpent. In addition, the attacks of the Void Blades did not follow any pattern whatsoever. Tier 4 Domain Skill, Void Storm. The descending Void Blades forced everyone to focus entirely on evasion. Now, players had to move constantly to dodge the Void Blades. This situation increased the raid difficulty by a large margin. Moreover, after using Void Storm, the Void Serpent still showed no signs of letting up on its offensive. Suddenly, its body started radiating a silver glow. A moment later, its gigantic body split into 2 smaller versions of itself. Its real body and a doppelganger. A doppelganger skill? Illusory Words' complexion darkened immediately. Among the multitude of skills boss monsters could possess, doppelganger skills were the most troublesome. Although doppelganger skills would reduce the overall attributes of the boss, the reduction would not be significant. With how powerful the Void Serpent was, MTs other than Cola still wouldn't be able to tank its doppelganger easily. Just as the doppelganger was about to strike at a nearby team, a figure suddenly appeared above it. In the next moment, a blue lightning bolt struck down on the serpent doppelganger's head, the blow forcing a cry from the doppelganger as its body crashed straight into the ground. The impact formed a massive crater with web-like cracks spreading out into the surroundings. Chapter 1903 Combat Power Unleashed. Chapter 1903 Combat Power Unleashed. As the team watched the serpent doppelganger smash into the ground, they gaped in shock before turning to Shifeng and the glowing, blue longsword in his hand. Although the void serpent's doppelganger was not as strong as the main boss, it rivaled ordinary mythic monsters, yet Shifeng had slammed it into the ground with brute force. The scene was on par with watching an ant topple a lion. It was hard to believe. Moreover, Shifeng's attack had dealt over -60,000 damage to the void serpent's doppelganger. Seeing this, the Tier 2 berserkers broke out in a cold sweat. Before his teammates could recover from their shock of seeing such a formidable performance, Shifeng brandished the abyssal blade and killing ray against the doppelganger once again. Purgatory Pentaslash. Shadow Blade. Sword lights glittered around Shifeng, and the watching players were overwhelmed as they watched his rapid attacks. Damages of over -20,000 appeared above the doppelganger's head, one after another. In the blink of an eye, Shifeng had landed over a dozen attacks on the doppelganger. In terms of DPS, not even Fire Dance and her companions, members of the first tier, were no match for Shifeng. "Everyone, focus your fire on the doppelganger!" Shifeng shouted after launching a series of attacks. "Be careful to dodge the void blades. All unties except Cola, protect the healers. Don't get greedy when attacking, and do not look into the doppelganger's magic eyes. Range DPS, use your strongest moves on the doppelganger's eyes on my command." The serpent doppelganger was a part of the void serpent. If they killed the doppelganger, the real void serpent would take a corresponding amount of damage. However, if they did not kill the doppelganger within a set time, the doppelganger would automatically disappear and heal the void serpent for a considerable amount of HP. They needed to kill the doppelganger immediately, or the void serpent would chip away at the team until they were all dead. Meanwhile, the serpent doppelganger's power wasn't its strength, but its passive skill, void magic eyes. Players would be briefly paralyzed if they looked directly into the doppelganger's eyes. In addition, the doppelganger could use the Tier 4 spell, Void Freeze, through its gaze. When cast, the spell would prevent all players within 150 yards of the doppelganger from using any skills and spells for 30 seconds. While players faced both the void serpent and its doppelganger, they'd team wipe if they couldn't use skills or spells for so long. Fortunately, there was a simple method of avoiding that outcome. They just had to destroy the doppelganger's eyes. All of these players were experts, and as Shifeng gave the command, the team redirected their attacks to the doppelganger. Every member of the team fully displayed the technique standards of guild experts. They easily avoided 2 or 3 void blades as they flew towards them while maintaining their attacks against the serpent doppelganger. If ordinary experts attempted to challenge this boss, they'd be at their limit just trying to dodge the void blades. They would have no energy for anything else. With Cola tanking the real void serpent and Shifeng, who had activated Heavenly Dragon's Breath, keeping the serpent doppelganger, which couldn't be aggroed, busy, the rest of the team was free to attack without worry. Whenever the doppelganger was about to cast Void Freeze, Shifeng instructed the team's ranged players to bombard the monster's eyes. Not only did the serpent doppelganger rapidly lose HP as a result, but the monster was also unable to deal any damage. "So, this is the Sword King's strength?" Illusory Words felt her admiration for Shifeng grow as she watched the man assault the monster, dodge void blades, and command the battle effortlessly. Despite such an intense fight against a mythic boss, Shifeng issued accurate and efficient commands for the team, effectively preventing one crisis after another. This ability was far more impressive than individual strength. When challenging a boss, there was a limit to how much an individual could achieve with their own strength. Only a cohesive team could effectively defeat boss monsters. Hence, leadership in a team was very important. With good leadership, a team could avoid unnecessary losses. This was also why the various large guilds and adventurer teams valued players with leadership skills. While an adventurer team's commander didn't need to be the strongest player on the team, they had to be able to command it. Not only was Shifeng ridiculously powerful as an individual, but he was also capable of commanding a 1,000-man team so precisely. After about 2 minutes, the serpent doppelganger, which had 40 million HP, fell, transforming into a gray smoke before flowing back into the void serpent as the doppelganger died. The void sparent instantly lost 40,000 HP, while the team hadn't lost a single player. After dealing with the doppelganger, the various guild experts refocused on the void serpent. 75%, 60%, 50%. When the void serpent's HP fell to 50%, it only had 4 HP bars remaining. At the same time, magic arrays began to manifest around the fight, and after a short moment, they merged to form a massive, blue magic array. Suddenly, translucent creatures began to pull themselves out of the blue array, and in seconds, hundreds and thousands of them joined the battlefield. The weakest of these monsters was a level 55 lord, while the stronger creatures were level 60 great lords. Everyone felt their scalps tingle when they saw the army of translucent creatures. It was as if the void serpent had opened a gate to another world, and the world's monsters poured out of the gate. Everyone, activate your berserk skills and attack the boss with everything you've got. Shifeng gave the blue magic array a serious look. This spell was one of the void serpent's team wipe moves, Void's Descent. If players did not reduce the void serpent's HP to 30%, the boss would continue to channel Void's Descent and summon more void creatures to the battle. There was no limit to the number of void creatures this ability could summon, either. In the past, the first players to raid the void serpent had been very high-leveled, some of which had already reached Tier 3. They had been able to cope with the endless army of void creatures easily, as a result. However, the majority of Shifeng's team hadn't even reached level 60, much less reached Tier 3. If they didn't drop the mythic boss's HP quickly, they'd definitely team wipe. It was at this moment that the players understood that they couldn't afford to hold back against so many void creatures. These players immediately activated their berserk skills as instructed, their basic attributes skyrocketing. They then tried to maintain their attacks against the void serpent, while fighting the waves of summoned creatures. Fortunately, the void serpent would not move or attack while it summoned its void creatures. Multiple void creatures assaulted every player on the team, and although they were all experts, the fight still crawled to a stalemate. Only Kola, Fire Dance, and the other humanoid monsters were able to cope with the summoned monsters. Shifeng didn't hold back either, as he activated Power of Darkness. He even used Phantom Kill and 9 Dragon Slash, and every Abyssal Blade Phantom repelled a void creature. With 16 Abyssal Blade Phantoms defending him, none of the void creatures could get close. Without having to worry about the surrounding monsters, Shifeng and his doppelganger were free to launch a frenzied assault against the void serpent, each attack dealing more than -50,000 damage. Following suit, Zhao Yueru and Alluring Summer cast one large-scale destruction spell after another, targeting the world boss. 48%, 47%, 46%. Although the void serpent's HP continued to fall, the team began to suffer casualties as it faced the endless torrent of void creatures. Normally, players employed Zerg tactics when raiding bosses, but this boss had turned the tables. The team experienced how frightening a boss's Zerg tactics could be, and every one of its void creatures was either a lord or great lord. 50 players had died in less than a minute after the void serpent had begun to summon void creatures. Vice Guild Leader, at this rate, we'll team wipe. Let's hurry and retreat. Dawn Master, who held off 2 great lords and 3 lords, hurriedly suggested. Although they held on, that would change as more void creatures joined the battle. Sure enough, a world boss is too much for current players. Illusory Words frowned as less than 800 members of the team remained standing. Crimson Emperor had already suffered over 30 casualties, and most of the survivors' HP constantly danced in and out of the danger zone. The team's healers simply couldn't keep up. Everyone, retreat! When they heard Illusory Words' command, Crimson Emperor's experts breathed a sigh of relief. They immediately formed a defensive circle and carved a path out of the battlefield. Once they had distanced themselves from the world boss, they used instantaneous movement magic scrolls, fleeing from the cavern. Now, only Zero Wings and Unyielding Souls members remained to face the Void Serpent. Meanwhile, the boss still had 39% of its HP remaining. Seeing this, Long Soul and Hunting Blade grew nervous, thoughts of urging Unyielding Heart to give the command to retreat surfacing. However, when Unyielding Heart saw that Shifeng hold fast, he, too, chose to persist. Team members continued to fall. 650 people. 600 people. 500 people. Break! When less than 400 players alive on the team, Shifeng and his doppelganger used flame bursts simultaneously. One after another, damages exceeding -400,000 appeared above the Void Serpent's head. By the time Shifeng and his doppelganger finished their attacks, the Void Serpent's HP fell to 30%. As it did, the mythic monster stopped channeling its spell. The blue magic array vanished, and the summoned void creatures disintegrated into ash. Foolish mortals, you will know despair! The Void Serpent lowered its head to look at the players before it, anger apparent in its gaze. The Void Serpent then spread its jaws and sucked in the void creature's ashes. The translucent Void Serpent then slowly transformed into a creature of flesh and blood, expanding and growing larger. Sharp bones jutted out along its spine, and after a short moment, the Void Serpent transformed into a gigantic, pitch-black beast, exuding turbid gas that filled the cavern. Roar! With a roar, the cavern began to tremble, shaking debris from the ceiling. This boss can grow even stronger? Long Soul felt true despair as he stared at the mountain-sized Void Serpent. Even Unyielding Heart felt discouraged. Now the team had used up their berserk skills, how could they continue to fight this strengthened Void Serpent? It's finally in its complete state. Shifeng felt an intense pressure from the Void Serpent. It seems that we don't need to hold back anymore. Kola, unleash your combat power! When Kola heard Shifeng's order, all of his worry about the world boss vanished. Now, only excitement and joy drove him. Leave it to me, guild leader! Kola grinned at the Void Serpent. He then charged at the monster without hesitation. Chapter 1904 Wargod of Fire. Chapter 1904 Wargod of Fire. With a light whip of its tail, the Void Serpent shattered the ground before the temple. Everyone could feel the stone beneath their feet quake. The Void Serpent's peerless strength and the turbid black gas instilled a sense of despair, and to make matters worse, the boss still had over 167 million HP. Unyielding Heart! Get it through your head! Our guild cannot afford to sacrifice 200 Tier 2 players. We need to retreat immediately. Long Soul growled as he turned on Unyielding Heart. At this point, the raid's outcome was clear. They had struggled against the Void Serpent when they had still had 1,000 Tier 2 players, but now, not only had the mythic monster grown stronger, but the team also had less than 400 players remaining. With so few players, finishing this raid was impossible. Moreover, Unyielding Soul had already lost close to 100 players, a severe blow to the guild. This wasn't a dungeon. If players died, they would lose a full level. Even if the healers resurrected them and reduced their death penalties, the loss would still be painful. Everyone, retreat! We cannot continue this crazy farce with Zero Wing! Hunting Blade, who stood beside the Void Serpent, commanded through the guild chat. Although Unyielding Heart was one of the guild's vice-guild leaders, he couldn't let the man risk the guild's future. However, as Unyielding Soul's members prepared to follow the order, Kola charged at the Void Serpent. The Guardian Knight showed no intentions of working with his companions to stop the world boss. Has he lost his mind? He's actually charging at the boss. Hunting Blade could not help but watch Kola in astonishment. While he acknowledged that Kola's attributes were frightening, without a berserk skill, the Guardian Knight had no hope of stopping the Void Serpent by himself. When the Void Serpent noticed Kola's approach, it squinted its amber eyes and swept its now scaly tail at the Guardian Knight as if sweeping away the dust on the ground. From afar, players noticed that space seemed to twist as the tail passed, barely withstanding the Void Serpent's strength. Come! Rather than shrink back in fear, Cola dashed to meet the attack. Just before the Void Serpent's tail struck the Guardian Knight, flames emerged from Cola's form. In the blink of an eye, Cola had transformed into a charging bonfire with a 6-meter radius, leaving his teammates confused. But despite the strange development, the Void Serpent had no intentions of slowing its tail attack as it struck the moving bonfire. Pun! It stopped. Since everyone had assumed that the Void Serpent's attack would extinguish the flames, they were shocked by the true outcome of the clash. The gigantic, scaly tail had actually stopped before the humanoid torch, unable to proceed any further. The stone beneath the raging fire cracked, only stopping over 20 yards away. After the flames subsided, they revealed a 6-meter giant. The giant wore a full set of flaming, crimson armor, the flames heat boiling the water in the air and turning the ground beneath it into lava. In addition, the giant wielded a flaming one-handed axe and a flaming shield. As the giant's aura washed over the team, they felt an intense pressure bear down on them, but it wasn't just a result of a difference in attributes. It was a result of a difference in life ratings. Before anyone could react, the flaming, armored giant sent a chop at the Void Serpent's tail. As the axe swung through the air, a sea of fire enveloped everything in a 30-yard cone before the giant. The burning weapon left a deep, scorched wound in the Void Serpent's tail as the mythic monster cried out in agony. A damage exceeding -80,000 also appeared above the Void Serpent's head, the attack's power astonishing the surrounding players. The injury enraged the Void Serpent, spreading its maw. The boss shot a spear of foul, black gas, and the spear flew so fast that not even the Tier 2 experts could keep up with the attack. Fortunately, the flaming giant reacted quickly, raising its flaming shield in time to stop the attack. The impact forced the giant to stumble 4 steps back, a damage of over -100,000 appearing above its head. The Void Serpent's destructive power had clearly improved. However, to everyone's surprise, the giant's HP bar had barely decreased despite so much damage. Upon closer inspection, they would have seen that the flaming giant had maximum HP of 12 million. With so much HP, over -100,000 damage was practically negligible. So, this is the power of the Wargod of Fire? Once he had steadied, Cola couldn't help but take a look at himself. He could feel that his physical control had reached unprecedented levels. In addition, his basic attributes were even higher than when he activated a berserk skill, especially his HP. Although he was still no match for actual monsters, he was leaps and bounds superior to other players and NPCs. Healers, focus on Cola! Everyone else, focus on the boss! Sherfone shouted. Even he was slightly surprised to see Cola single-handedly tank the Void Serpent. He hadn't dreamed that the Wargod of Fire transformation would be so powerful. Meanwhile, Sherfeng's command shook everyone from their daze. Cola? That flaming giant is Cola? The revelation shocked Long's soul. So, this is the trump card Black Flame had prepared? Unyielding Heart was similarly astounded. At the same time, he envied Zero Wing a little. With such a powerful MT, Zero Wing would have no problems raiding level 60, 100-man team dungeons in the future. The guild would also collect level 60 top-tier weapons and equipment far faster than the various superpowers, securing a massive advantage. Meanwhile, Cola rendered the Void Serpent powerless thanks to his recent transformation. Although it launched a series of frenzied attacks, Cola stopped every one effortlessly. Moreover, since the mythic boss had entered its complete form, it had lost the effects of its passive skill, Void Body, and its battle recovery. From now on, all damage the boss received would be permanent. However, the Berserk Void Serpent wasn't an easy foe. From time to time, it launched AoE breath attacks, and players still had to cope with the Void Blades. The team steadily lost players. Once the situation had stabilized, Sherfone focused on his offense. After Phantom Kill's cooldown ended, he summoned his doppelganger and used Dragon Soul, transforming his doppelganger into a black dragon. Although the doppelganger would lose its weapons and equipment after transforming, the black dragon's life rating and strength surpassed Cola's by a large margin. Most importantly, the Black Dragon was a level 69 monster. Each time the Black Dragon attacked, it devoured a large chunk of the Void Serpent's HP. 24%. 20%. 16%. When less than 300 players remained alive on the team, the Void Serpent's HP had fallen below 1 million. Seeing this, Sherfong activated Icarus's heart, which he had reclaimed from Aqua Rose earlier. Using Instant Strike to appear before the Void Serpent, he brandished the Abyssal Blade and Killing Ray. Purgatory Pentaslash. Shadow Blade. One powerful skill after another struck the Void Serpent, devouring the final strand of HP the world boss possessed. With a frustrated cry, the Void Serpent's colossal body collapsed to the ground. Chapter 1905 World-Class Loot. Chapter 1905 World-Class Loot. Watching the Void Serpent collapse to the ground, the players in the cavern breathed a deep sigh of relief. They had finally defeated the world boss. "We did it! I nearly thought we were goners!" Although all of these players were Tier 2 experts, some slid to the ground, powerless, after the battle had ended. The team had less than 300 survivors, and everyone was exhausted beyond belief. Their weapons and equipment's durability had been severely depleted, and had the battle gone on for any longer, they would have been at risk of losing the items during the fight. Moreover, the healers were nearly out of mana. They wouldn't have lasted more than a few minutes. Many players instantly rose from level 57 to 58 as the world boss had died thanks to the abundant EXP the Void Serpent had awarded. The boss's death had granted so much EXP that even a level 69 player like Sherfong watched his experience bar gain a sizable chunk. However, the survivor's attention was locked on the Void Serpent's loot, rather than the awarded EXP. After the Void Serpent had died, it had dropped a small mountain of items, including items, materials, and 4 dazzling treasure chests. The cavern's mana passively gathered around the small mountain of items, making it obvious that the loot was quite extraordinary. Seeing this scene, the staring players couldn't help but gulp. "So, this is a world boss's loot?" Long Soul, who had managed to survive raid, was dumbfounded when he saw the large mound of items. There were easily over 100 items, maybe even more than 300. Based on what he could see, more than 10 items radiated the signature glow effect of dark gold equipment. Even more items gave off the light of fine gold weapons and equipment. The Void Serpent was a level 60 world boss, so the weapons and equipment it dropped were likely all level 60 items. In the worst-case scenario, some items might be level 55. These were the best weapons and equipment available in the game right now. Furthermore, the pile contained several gold, glowing treasure chests. Just looking at all of them caused Long Soul's heartbeat to accelerate. Naturally, Unyielding Heart was similarly excited and envious upon seeing the small mountain. He hadn't expected the Void Serpent to drop so many items. Its loot could likely boost a 100-man team's combat power by a significant margin. Of course, the Zero Wing members present stared at the loot with brightly glowing eyes. Since they had participated in the raid, they'd have priority when purchasing the items. If they purchased the items now, they wouldn't have to spend as many GCPs than if they waited until the items showed up in the guild warehouse. This loot really is frightening. Even Sherfong was a little surprised to see so many items. Normally, a world boss only dropped a little more than 100 items, but it was obvious that the mound contained far more than that. Moreover, the Void Serpent had dropped extremely rare treasure chests. Following which, Sherfong began to organize the boss's loot, and the surviving healers turned to resurrect the dead, reducing the slain players' death penalties. Sherfong had only finished with the loot after the healers had returned all of the players to life. The Void Serpent had dropped a total of 413 items. Among them, 267 were rare and precious materials. None of the rare materials were available on the market, and 17 were even inferior legendary rank. Take the Void Serpent scales, for example. Void scales were natural armor kits and far more powerful than advanced mana armor kits. When equipped, not only would one of these scales reduce incoming damage by 10%, but it would also improve physique by 5% and basic attributes by 8%. Unfortunately, players were only able to equip one Void Scale. Even so, just one offered a massive boost. The Void Scales were especially potent on an MT's equipment. A total of 11 Void Scales had dropped. There were also 4 Void Fangs among the inferior legendary materials. The Void Fang could be used to strengthen weapons. When used, they would grant the weapon the Void Rend effect, increasing damage by 10% and ignoring one tier of defense. The last 2 inferior legendary materials were bottles of Void Blood, each containing 100 drops. Not only was Void Blood a key component in activating the Otherworld Gate, but it was also the main material to brew Void Wine. When consumed, Void Wine would permanently increase all attributes by 20 points and physique by 5%. Each bottle of Void Wine had sold for at least 600 gold during Shifeng's previous life, but even at that price, the various large guilds had fought to claim them. The Void Wine recipe was also among the 146 items the Void Serpent had dropped, although only master chefs could brew it. Of the 146 items, 35 were level 55 to 60 fine gold weapons and equipment, including the Mana Heart set, a level 60 fine gold set equipment for elementalists, and the Earthen Protector set, a level 60 fine gold set equipment for shield warriors. Unfortunately, both sets were incomplete. Only 4 set pieces of each had dropped. The rest of the fine gold items were individual pieces. As for dark gold rank, 16 level 55 to 60 weapons and equipment had dropped, including the Magic Storm set, a level 60 dark gold set equipment for magical classes. However, only 5 pieces had dropped. To complete the set, Shifeng would need to acquire 3 more pieces. The rest of the dark gold items were all individual pieces, the most valuable of which was the Magic Serpent Buckler. Although these fine gold and dark gold weapons and equipment were considered top tier at this stage of the game, they were subpar at best compared to the remaining weapons and equipment the Void Serpent had dropped. Of the remaining weapons and equipment, 3 pieces were epic rank, and 1 was fragmented legendary rank. All of the fine gold and dark gold items combined weren't worth the total value of these 4. The 3 epic items that had dropped were the Void Robe, Void Gloves, and Sacred Word Staff. The Void Robe and Void Gloves were part of the Void Magic set, a bona fide epic set equipment. The 2-piece set effect alone increased the wearer's maximum mana and physique by 20%. The Void Magic set was definitely the best set equipment for magical classes at this stage of the game. After all, a magical class player's mana was the equivalent of a second life. As for the Sacred Word Staff, it was a top-tier staff that allowed players to cast their 1-second spells instantly. It also increased spell completion rate by 4%. However, these 3 epic items were nothing compared to the fragmented legendary item. Even this dropped? Shifeng was ecstatic when he saw the ring of 2 carved snakes, 1 black and 1 white. Almost everyone in God's domain had heard of this ring in the past. The Fate Ring. Chapter 1906 Fate Ring. Chapter 1906 Fate Ring. Guild Leader, what is that ring? Aqua Rose, who stood nearby, asked in surprise when she saw the Fate Ring in Shifeng's hand. She could feel the mana density around her increase drastically. After Shifeng had stored the dropped items in his bag, the surrounding mana density had returned to normal, but the moment he had retrieved the Fate Ring, the mana density in a 20-yard radius around Shifeng had skyrocketed. In God's domain, items that passively attracted mana were incredibly rare. Even so, she had seen quite a few. However, this was the first time she had seen an item that could increase its ambient mana density so intensely despite being inactive. Looking at it now, it seemed as if the Fate Ring was the main cause for the intense mana around the mountain of loot. The Fate Ring, Shifeng said. It can help players develop until they reach the apex of God's domain. Help players develop to the apex? Aqua Rose was utterly confused. A top-tier weapon or equipment piece could significantly increase a player's combat power, and it would be a great help to the player's development, but even a fragmented legendary item's assistance would be limited. Yet, Sherfone claimed that the ring in his hand was capable of helping players reach the game's apex. No matter how she looked at it, he had to be joking. She had been Twilight Echoes, a first-rate guild honorary elder. Hence, she knew exactly how difficult it was for a player to reach the virtual gaming world's apex. It wasn't something someone could do by relying on one or two pieces of equipment. Furthermore, unlike other virtual reality games, the competition in God's domain was particularly intense. However, Sherfone simply smiled at Aqua Rose's confusion. He did not bother to explain further. On its own, the Fate Ring didn't have any particular powerful effects. In fact, one might even consider it a weak item. Aside from providing some basic attributes, the ring only had one skill. Moreover, the ring's basic attribute bonuses were standard for an ordinary epic item. Even if players acquired the Fate Ring, they might be embarrassed to call it a fragmented legendary item. However, when a first-rate guild had purchased the Fate Ring at an auction during Sherfeng's previous life, its guild leader had changed his fate after equipping the ring, eventually becoming one of God's domain's top powerhouses. Even after 10 years, that guild leader had still been a godly existence. The achievement had invoked the other large guild's jealousy, and the superpower that had sold the ring had been racked with regret. This skill was incomparably powerful. When activated, it granted players an opportunity. However, the impact of the opportunity varied. A small opportunity would most likely lead players to a piece of mysterious iron equipment that was suited to them, while a larger opportunity could lead players to a fragmented legendary item. The skill had one downside though: using Fate Guidance had a massive cost. Each time a player wanted to use Fate Guidance, they had to expend 1 unit of 7 Luminaries crystal. Only after paying this price would the skill guide players to their opportunity. 7 Luminaries crystals were an important resource, necessary to construct one's mind space. The various large guilds treated them as peerless treasures. Nobody would sell a unit of 7 Luminaries crystal unless they had no other choice. Although the superpower that had acquired the Fate Ring had tested the ring's ability out of curiosity, it had quickly discovered that Fate Guidance was a fraudulent scam. Moreover, the scam knew no bounds. Of the 100 attempts the superpower had made, more than 90 had yielded mysterious iron weapons, equipment, and tools. The remaining attempts had led the superpower to secret silver items, and only one had led to a fine gold item. To the various large guilds, 1 unit of 7 Luminaries crystal was worth more than the latest top-tier dark gold weapon or equipment piece. Gathering dark gold items was, after all, several times easier than collecting 7 Luminaries crystals. No one would trade 100 units of 7 Luminaries crystals for a pile of junk, so the Fate Ring had switched owners multiple times until it had been claimed by the lucky first-rate guild. That lucky guild hadn't invested a lot of 7 Luminaries crystals before it had struck gold. Overall, the guild had only spent several dozen units before securing a large opportunity, which had yielded a fragmented legendary item. If given the opportunity, any power would be more than willing to trade several dozen units of 7 Luminaries crystals for a fragmented legendary item. As a result, the lucky first-rate guild had proceeded to invest a lot of 7 Luminaries crystals, but the guild had quickly discovered that the Fate Ring wasn't as kind as they had assumed. After investing several hundred units of 7 Luminaries crystals and getting nothing good in return, the guild had slowed its investment. Even so, the guild had occasionally tried its luck. It had only discovered the Fate Ring's secret after hitting a second jackpot and acquiring a Master Magic Array design. The Fate Ring only guaranteed one major opportunity once every 1,000 uses. However, spending 1,000 units of 7 Luminaries crystals in exchange for one major opportunity was simply too costly. Meanwhile, God's domain had more than one Fate Ring. When this lucky first-rate guild had acquired its second Fate Ring, the ring's value had truly shined. After merging 2 Fate Rings, Fate Guidance granted a major opportunity once every 500 uses. Unfortunately, claiming the opportunities would become far more difficult, but it was still possible for ordinary expert players. Furthermore, players could acquire a top-tier item by simply spending 500 units of 7 Luminaries crystals, which was certainly a worthwhile price. Due to this change, the lucky first-rate guild's guild leader had gradually collected top-tier weapons, equipment, and tools for himself, increasing his strength and eventually becoming one of God's domain's apex players. Of course, the heaven-defying items acquired via fate guidance were only suitable to help one player reach the apex, since each opportunity only yielded items suitable for the player that activated the skill. If other players used the items, their performance would suffer. Other players couldn't even use certain items, such as those that granted skills and combat techniques. In other words, the lucky first-rate guild had spent a frightening amount of 7 luminaries crystals to nurture a single apex powerhouse. However, Shifeng had no intentions of replicating that guild's actions. While nurturing a single apex expert might be worthwhile to guilds that didn't have any, the same couldn't be said for Zero Wing. In fact, doing so would be a waste of time and resources. Zero Wing had far more experts than any first-rate guild, and those experts' potential was far superior to those in first-rate guilds. It was only a matter of time before the guild had multiple apex powerhouses. Hence, instead of wasting tons of 7 luminaries crystals on nurturing an ordinary expert, it would be much wiser and more efficient to use the fate ring to help an expert, who was only a step away from the apex, cross the final hurdle. It seems I'll have to find an opportunity to secure some 7 luminaries crystals, Shifeng inwardly decided. Zero Wing already had a lot of guild members capable of contending with peak experts, but it had very few members that could rival apex experts. Although Shadow Sword, Turtledove, Flying Shadow, and a handful of other members of Zero Wing's main force were capable of contending with superpowers peak experts by relying on their equipment advantage, as players progressed, this advantage would shrink. If Shadow Sword and the others didn't improve their combat standards, it would only be a matter of time before others surpassed them. However, if they used fate guidance, they could quickly gain the combat power they needed to rival apex experts. As Shifeng finished examining the loot, he sold 16 pieces of equipment for MTs and DPS classes, including the level 60 Dark Gold Shield, Magic Serpent Buckler. He did not, however, decide to sell the Earthen Protector set. The situation surprised Unyielding Heart. He had expected Shifeng to refuse to sell both the Magic Serpent Buckler and the Earthen Protector set. The fact that Shifeng had allowed him to purchase the buckler, which was even more valuable than the set equipment, was shocking. However, what Unyielding Heart did not know was that Zero Wing did not need powerful shields. Even the weakest shield Zero Wing's 3 core MTs used was an epic shield. A level 60 Dark Gold Shield was nothing in comparison. The Earthen Protector set, though, was different. Yi Wenyan still wore the level 50 Magic Light set, which was weaker than the Earthen Protector set. Hence, this was a perfect opportunity for Yi Wenyan to upgrade his equipment. Aside from weapons and equipment, Shifeng had decided to sell a few Void Scales to Unyielding Heart. Upon seeing the Void Scales attributes, Long Soul's eyes went bloodshot. If given to an MT, the Void Scale would elevate the player's standards to a whole new level. In the past, Void Scales had sold for around 5,000 to 7,000 gold on the market, so Shifeng sold them to Unyielding Heart for 10,000 gold each. With so much money, one could afford a low-quality piece of epic equipment. Although Unyielding Heart could not help but wince at the price, he still agreed to buy 3 Void Scales. Meanwhile, Shifeng's transaction with Unyielding Heart had instantly earned him 42,000 gold. With this much money, he could rent a few more hotels and restaurants in the Sea of Trees. After Shifeng had finished his business with the vice guild leader, he led the team out of the cavern. Since the cavern was isolated from the outside world, players couldn't use return scrolls while inside. Even an instantaneous movement magic scroll would only teleport players to the edge of the cavern. It would not teleport them out of it. When Illusory Words and her guild members, who had waited in the first cavern, saw Shifeng and the others emerge, they were astonished. How did so many people get out of there? Chapter 1907 Otherworld Gate activated. Chapter 1907 Otherworld Gate activated. Crimson Emperor's survivors were stunned as Shifeng and his team emerged from behind the waterfall. They had personally experienced the Void Serpent's strength, and when they had left the cavern, the situation had seemed dismal. Countless void creatures had filled the cavern. Even though they had started to carve a path out of the cavern before the situation had taken a turn for the worse, they had lost quite a few people on their way out. The void creatures had only given up the chase once they had left the cavern. However, no matter how they considered the situation, Shifeng's group had far more people alive than when they had left. Moreover, some of Crimson Emperor's experts were among the group. Could they have slain the Void Serpent? An unrealistic thought suddenly popped into Illusory Words' mind. Although she couldn't believe that they had completed the raid, the scene before her removed any doubt there was no other explanation. A moment later, Illusory Words began to receive messages from the Crimson Emperor members that had just left the waterfall's pool. Since the world behind the waterfall was isolated from the rest of God's domain, they hadn't been able to send messages to their guildmates after they had been revived. Hence, they had contacted Illusory Words the moment they had emerged, reporting the Void Serpent raid's outcome. Meanwhile, aside from the fact that Zero Wing had slain the Void Serpent, the reports mentioned the Void Serpent's loot and the fact that Zero Wing had sold quite a few items to Unyielding Soul. So, is that why Unyielding Heart was so adamant about fighting to the end? Illusory Words could not help her bitter smile as she read her subordinate's messages. Although she did not know which items Unyielding Soul had purchased from Zero Wing, the Void Serpent was a world boss. How could any of the items be poor quality? Zero Wing might not have sold the best weapons and equipment to Unyielding Soul, but even the second-rate items would be a massive harvest for the guild. At the very least, Unyielding Soul could fortify its main force's combat power. Vice Guild Leader, why don't we try to purchase some of the Void Serpent's loot from Zero Wing at a high price? We have, more or less, participated in the raid, and we suffered quite a few losses. Zero Wing will likely agree if we ask, Dawn Master suggested softly. With how powerful the Void Serpent was, its loot would definitely be extraordinary. It might have even dropped a level 60 top-tier weapons and equipment. Any of those items would be far stronger than the weapons and equipment their guild's experts currently wore. If they could acquire some for their guild's main force, they would have a much easier time raiding the various level 60, 100-man Hell mode team dungeons in the future. Forget it. Asking will likely be useless. After all, we didn't propose such a condition like Unyielding Heart, Illusory Words said, shaking her head. Sighing, she gave Unyielding Heart an envious look. Unyielding Heart made the right bet this time. Although she slightly regretted her earlier decision, this trip hadn't been fruitless. At the very least, she now knew that Zero Wing was not as simple as everyone assumed. Following which, Illusory Words approached Shifeng and congratulated him and Zero Wing on their success against the world boss. After some brief pleasantries, Illusory Words shifted the conversation toward the drunken tiger meat and frozen bone soup. Guild Leader Black Flame, may I know if you still have any drunken tiger meat and frozen bone soup left? If you do, Crimson Emperor is willing to purchase 1,000 of each dish at 5 gold per serving. Illusory Words offered. While she had given up on acquiring any of the Void Serpent's loot, the master dishes Shifeng had revealed earlier were a different story. She hadn't seen master dishes like those since she had joined God's domain. Although they were not as effective as master potions, they could stack with potions. In addition, the 2 master dishes could be used to raid world bosses. This tremendously increased their usefulness. Moreover, they would make dungeon raids slightly easier. As Illusory Words finished speaking, Unyielding Heart, who still celebrated his portion of the Void Serpent's loot, snapped out of his daze and realized that he had forgotten about the 2 master dishes. Guild Leader Black Flame, if you still have any of those master dishes remaining, Unyielding Soul will also purchase 1,000 of each dish at 5 gold per serving. Unyielding Heart hurriedly said. Hearing the 2 Vice Guild Leaders' interest in purchasing the master dishes, Shifeng inwardly celebrated. Both the drunken tiger meat and the frozen bone soup cost a little over 1 gold to make. Moreover, both had a 100% production success rate. Selling the dishes to the 2 super first-rate guilds would earn plenty of profits. I don't have any more of the master dishes on me, but if you 2 want them, I can get some for you. However, it'll take some time for me to gather the requested amounts. May I know if you two are willing to wait? Shifeng asked. The 2 dishes required a lot of time to make, and each guild wanted 1,000 servings of both. The order would take a few days to fulfill. That won't be a problem. I can wait as long as I can purchase them. Crimson Emperor will also pay a 5,000 gold deposit. Illusory Words said, settling the deal once she realized that it was possible. The 2 master dishes wouldn't become obsolete with time. They would work wonderfully at any point. She had worried that Shifeng would reject her offer, but now that he had agreed, she decided to form a contract, binding the agreement as a precaution. With this, she had reaped an additional benefit from her trip here. Meanwhile, Unyielding Heart chose to do the same, binding the agreement with Shifeng and paying a 5,000 gold deposit. Naturally, Shifeng was more than willing to play along with the 2 vice guild leaders. After signing the contracts, an additional 10,000 filled Shifeng's pockets. With this, he had made a total of 52,000 gold from this single boss raid. If the various first-rate guilds knew about this, their envy would drive them mad. After all, current first-rate guilds were fortunate if they even had 30,000 gold in liquid funds. Following which, Unyielding Soul and Crimson Emperor's members used return scrolls and returned to the Dark Knight Empire. Meanwhile, Shifeng had Zero Wing's members returned to Zero Wing City to rest. As for Shifeng, he used the 7 Luminaries ring to teleport to the Million Forest, which happened to be the Emerald Dryad's territory. The Million Forest was a dangerous location to almost all players due to the area's large Dryad population. If a player encountered a single Dryad, it would immediately call for reinforcements, and a large number of the creatures would quickly gather. Moreover, this cycle would continue. Once a certain number of Dryads had gathered, it would attract the Emerald Dryad's attention. Hence, very few players were willing to adventure in the Million Forest. Shifeng, however, had teleported directly to the heart of the Million Forest. Great Lord rank Dryads wandered all over the area. If Shifeng hadn't been level 69 and used an isolation scroll before he had teleported, the level 55 plus monsters would have discovered him. This should be the place. It didn't take Shifeng long to discover a grass-covered, dilapidated magic array within the forest. The array seemed blurry, and if not for the massive stone pillars around it, he would have had a hard time finding the magic array. This was the teleportation array that led to the Otherworld gate. To revitalize the teleportation array, one needed a full bottle of void blood. Immediately, Shifeng walked to the center of the teleportation array and retrieved a bottle of void blood from his bag. After removing the cap, he emptied the bottle's contents onto the magic array's center. As void blood flowed into the magic array, it seemed to revive, rapidly gathering the ambient mana. The magic array seemed to absorb mana from farther away as time passed, and eventually, it drew mana from throughout the Million Forest, making the area's Dryads tremble with fear. After 3 minutes, a towering pillar of crimson light shot forth from the center of the Million Forest, visible from the surrounding maps. The players grinding in the nearby maps couldn't help but turn to look at the light pillar, overwhelmed by their curiosity, as they started to move towards it. Shortly after these players began to travel towards the light pillar, a series of system notifications rang in every player's ears in Starmoon Kingdom. Chapter 1908 Changes to the Witch's Hill. Chapter 1908 Changes to the Witch's Hill. Starmoon Kingdom Region System Announcement. A player has triggered the new expansion pack. Otherworld. The expansion pack will take effect in the Witch's Hill in 6 hours. Starmoon Kingdom Region System Announcement. An Otherworld gate has been activated. A large amount of Otherworld energy has flowed into the Witch's Hill, driving the area's mana into chaos. Please take care when roaming through the Witch's Hill. The sudden system announcement had caught Starmoon Kingdom's players off guard. However, after a few seconds, every player in the kingdom went into an uproar. What's going on? Another new expansion pack? This new expansion pack is amazing. Doesn't this mean that we can head to an Otherworld to level up? According to rumors, it seems that Otherworlds have more abundant resources than the continent of God's domain. I've heard that too. Not only are Otherworlds rich in resources, but leveling there is also much faster. We'll be able to travel to an Otherworld from the Witch's Hill in 6 hours? In that case, I'm heading there immediately. The large guilds have already monopolized every high-resource map. Independent players like us can't even earn enough money to afford the latest equipment. The moment they heard the system announcement, independent players and adventurer teams began to swarm towards the Witch's Hill. As the number of resource maps in Starmoon Kingdom dwindled as players reached higher levels, there were fewer opportunities for independent players to earn money. Now that a completely new map, one not owned by any guild, had appeared, this was a golden opportunity for independent players. As players reached higher levels, money would become an increasingly larger problem. Although players continued to earn more money each day, they had higher expenditures. Take weapons and equipment, for example. After level 50, the drop rate for top-tier weapons and equipment had decreased drastically. Even ordinary weapons and equipment drop rates had been affected. This caused the prices for level 50+ weapons and equipment to skyrocket. This was also the case for repair fees. Moreover, as high-level resource maps were so far from NPC cities, teleportation fees had increased. High-level resource maps also had harsh environments, so players had to prepare appropriate weapons, equipment, tools, and potions if they wanted to grind effectively in these areas. And everything cost money. As God's Domain continued to develop as a game, it provided a wider variety of services for players to enjoy, as well. After a hard day of work, many players sought food, beverages, and all sorts of entertainment. There were also the fees to learn skills and spells, and applying for a promotion quest was expensive. Now that a new opportunity to make money had arisen, how could anyone miss it? Naturally, Starmoon Kingdom's various large guilds had called their upper echelons for a meeting the moment they had learned of the Otherworld Gate. A path to an Otherworld? This is a perfect chance for our guild. I've heard that the players and guilds in the Black Dragon Empire have made a fortune due to the path to the Ice Crystal World. We have to monopolize this Otherworld's resources before the other guilds. But the Witch's Hill is Zero Wings territory. If we tried to set up in the Otherworld, I'm afraid that. What's there to be afraid of? Now that Starmoon Kingdom has its own Otherworld, the kingdom's guilds are going to swarm to it. Can Zero Wing hope to stop so many guilds? Although, you have reminded me of something. Start raising funds right now and figure out a way to build a town in the Witch's Hill. After the various large guilds had found out about the Otherworld Gate, they dispatched exploration teams to test the waters. They also gathered resources to construct their own towns in the Witch's Hill. Even a fool could tell that a large number of players would flood the map now that an Otherworld Gate had appeared, and all of those players were potential income sources. If they could construct a guild town in the Witch's Hill, they could definitely make a ton of money. Less than 10 minutes after the system announcement, Aqua Rose, who currently rested in Zero Wing City, was astonished as she received Zero Wing's latest statistics report. In 10 short minutes, Zero Wing City's player population had risen by more than 100,000, earning the city several hundred gold in entrance fees. Moreover, Aqua Rose had received hundreds of requests to rent Zero Wing City's shops. Before today, the various trading firms and merchant players had hesitated about leasing shops in Zero Wing City due to the high rent. Very few had actually agreed to do so thus far. Without certain guarantees, earning back the costs would be almost impossible, yet several hundred people had just petitioned to lease the buildings. And this wasn't the most surprising part. Several dozen real-world corporations and companies had contacted the guild to purchase virtual storefronts in Zero Wing City. Moreover, these companies and corporations had offered astronomical sums of money, even enough to tempt Aqua Rose. Despite the fact that Zero Wing was now a very large guild, it severely lacked credits. Normally, the guild only earned credits by selling weapons and equipment, or completing difficult commissions. It usually avoided exchanging coins and materials for credits since it was such an unwise move. Hence, Zero Wing's ability to earn credits was so weak that it couldn't even rival second-rate guilds. The lack of credits ultimately hampered Zero Wing's development. If the guild could secure a massive source of credits, it could nurture more internal members and fortify its foundation. Following which, Aqua Rose reported the matter to Sherfone, letting him decide how they should proceed. There are so many offers? Sherfone could not help his grin when he saw the list of interested buyers and their respective offers. Tell them that Zero Wing City's virtual storefronts are only available for rent, not for sale. We will hold an auction for these storefronts in Zero Wing City's candlelight trading firm in 2 days. The situation didn't particularly surprise him. The moment the Otherworld Gate appeared, Witch's Hill had become Star Moon Kingdom's focus. A frightening number of players would surge to the city, and it wouldn't be surprising if Zero Wing City's player population shot past the 10 million threshold. Previously, the Witch's Hill had been considered a backwater area. Although the various corporations and companies had been impressed that Zero Wing City had several million residential players, how long could the city possibly maintain its prosperity? However, the Otherworld Gate changed things. Even after players reached higher levels, they could continue to level in the Otherworld connected to the Witch's Hill's Otherworld Gate. They would not have to move their base of operations after hitting level 60 or 70. Even players past level 100 could level up in the Otherworld. Unfortunately, the Otherworld wouldn't be as vast as the God's Domain continent. To put it simply, so long as the Otherworld Gate existed, the Witch's Hill would remain popular. Hence, one could easily imagine Zero Wing City's allure toward these corporations and companies. We're not selling? Aqua Rose could not help her growing concern as she said. I'm afraid they won't agree to such a condition. There are too many uncertainties involved in leasing a virtual storefront. They'll only be able to operate their businesses comfortably if they own the property. Moreover, the various large guilds will definitely try to establish guild towns in the Witch's Hill now that it has an Otherworld Gate. If we don't take advantage of this opportunity now, we'll be in an awkward position later. Relax. You'll see the results in 2 days, Sherfone said, chuckling. He did not bother to explain further. What Aqua Rose said was indeed true. The appearance of the Otherworld Gate would lure a lot of large guilds to establish guild towns in the Witch's Hill, and the competition in the map would become intense. However, the various large guilds didn't know how difficult it was for a guild town to survive long in the Witch's Hill. Realizing that Sherfone had made up his mind, Aqua Rose relayed his message to the corporations and companies that had contacted the guild. Chapter 1909 Witch's Sin. Only for rent? How fraudulent! Chapter 1909 Witch's Sin. Only for rent? How fraudulent! Does Zero Wing think that it's the only guild that will have a town in the Witch's Hill? Since Zero Wing doesn't plan to sell, forget it. We'll just wait a few more days. The kingdom's other large guilds will set up their own guild towns in the map, and we'll just purchase storefronts there. Zero Wing will regret its decision. When the various corporations and companies received Aqua Rose's reply, some laughed, while others raged. As for the auction Aqua Rose had mentioned, they'd pushed the matter to the back of their minds. Only a fool would participate. The situation frustrated Aqua Rose a little. They had just lost a golden opportunity to fund Zero Wing's internal training program. Fortunately, this wasn't the end of the world for Zero Wing. With Zero Wing's current potential, luring investors to the guild would be a piece of cake. With the current state of God's Domain, various corporations and companies were even fighting to invest in second-rate guilds, not to mention Zero Wing. After Aqua Rose set the matter aside, she focused on recruiting new members for the guild. After transferring a large number of guild members from White River City and Zero Wing City to the Secret Stone Fortress, both cities had lost a lot of manpower. Thus, they needed to replenish their member count. Moreover, with the Otherworld Gate's activation, some well-known adventurer teams that had hesitated about joining Zero Wing had made up their minds. Although Zero Wing City was relatively far away from the Million Forest, Zero Wing City's teleport service could reach the forest. Furthermore, even if these adventurer teams didn't want to develop in Star Moon Kingdom, they could develop in the Ore Empire after joining the guild. Zero Wing's current resources were now beyond that of a first-rate guild, after all. As fewer resource maps were available in the kingdom, living space for the various adventurer teams dwindled. If the various adventurer teams wanted to maintain an adequate development speed, they'd have to copy the top and large-scale adventurer teams. They would have to venture to remote and dangerous maps to level and acquire resources. However, this wasn't an easy task. Like the guilds, God's Domain's adventurer teams faced fierce competition. In fact, the intensity of the competition between adventurer teams was no less than the competition between guilds. Only, the scale was not as large. Hence, if the well-known adventurer teams, which had already reached a bottleneck in their development, wished to grow their strength, joining a powerful guild was a wise move. Because of this, as many as 30 adventurer teams had petitioned to join Zero Wing. The smaller teams only had several hundred members, while the larger ones had thousands. Every adventurer team had accumulated a certain amount of resources and quite a few experts, as well as bountiful experience fighting as a team and raiding team dungeons. If Zero Wing could annex these adventurer teams, it would save the guild a lot of effort when integrating their players in guild operations. Elsewhere, Shifeng spent one magic crystal to activate the teleportation array leading to the Otherworld gate. He was then teleported to a massive, dark cavern. Within the cavern, he found a ruined town. A gigantic set of doors had been erected inside this ruined town. There was a small gap between the pitch-black, stone doors, and a turbid mist seeped out and filled the cavern. As Shifeng encountered the mist, he felt his 5 senses dull. He had been able to see up to 50 yards away, but now, he could only see a dozen or so yards past his nose. Both his mind and his body felt lethargic. Sure enough, this primordial gas is as powerful as always. Shifeng revealed a bitter smile after trying to move his body a little. It seems that this gas is still too much for Tier 2 players. The Witches' Hill's Otherworld had once been a part of the God's Domain continent, severed by the gods during ancient times. Humans had been weak then, one of the most ordinary races among the many that had lived on the continent. God's Domain had been chaotic then, its environment too harsh for humankind. However, after a catastrophic war between the gods, the continent of God's Domain had been divided into various sections, thoroughly changing the environment. It was no longer as chaotic or violent. As a result, the human race had gradually grown stronger. But even to this day, certain sections retained their harsh environments. Meanwhile, the turbid gas flowing out of the Otherworld gate was none other than primordial gas. When Shifeng had first entered the Otherworld gate, he had already Tier 3, so the primordial gas hadn't significantly affected him. This time, however, he could feel the gas's negative effects. His combat power had just decreased by roughly 30%. The primordial gas affected more than just his reaction speed and senses, even his physique had considerably weakened. Shifeng now, more or less, understood why only Tier 2 and higher players were allowed through the Otherworld gate. Only a small trace of primordial gas leaked out of the Otherworld gate, yet its effect on a Tier 2 player like him was so powerful. If players entered the Otherworld, filled with primordial gas, its effect would be absolutely terrifying. Not only did the primordial gas suppress players, but it also created a perfect environment for monsters to thrive. The primordial gas drastically increased monsters' combat power, and once the Otherworld gate opened fully, the gas would spread throughout the Witches' Hill. The area would become chaotic and violent, which was why only 4 guild towns had survived in Shifeng's previous life, despite so many guilds establishing guild towns. The towns hadn't fallen because of the various first-rate guilds suppressing its weaker counterparts, but because the second- and third-rate guilds hadn't been able to fend off the monsters that had assaulted their towns at night. As Shifeng prepared to enter the ruined town, a wizened, dignified voice reached his ears. "Young adventurer, are you the one who activated the teleportation array I had left behind?" When Shifeng turned around to the origin of this voice, he discovered an old woman in black robes, and carrying a wooden staff. This woman was none other than the Otherworld Gate's guardian. She was also a legendary existence in God's Domain. The Jealous Witch. Shifeng had only thought of the Jealous Witch as an incredibly powerful, Tier 5 NPC during his previous life, but after learning about demigods, Shifeng concluded that this NPC was one such being. She was only a step short of becoming a Tier 6 god and was one of the strongest NPCs on the continent of God's Domain right now. Yes, esteemed Lady Witch. Sherfong nodded. He did not dare to hide information from the jealous witch. She was known for being unpredictable. Sometimes she would help slaughter the dark forces, but other times she would casually massacre tens of thousands of innocent humans. Her behavior had frustrated God's domain's human population. The jealous witch maintained her unpredictable behavior towards players. There had been instances in the past when she had exterminated players she had encountered. When those players had died by her hand, their accounts had been so crippled that their only option of maintaining a career in God's domain had required a new account. After dozens of these incidents, players had learned to fear the jealous witch in the Witch's Hill and did their best to avoid her. Meanwhile, Sherfong had visited this ruined town despite knowing that the jealous witch would be here to pick up an important epic quest. If he could complete the quest, he could obtain the rumored advanced field magic array, Void Field. Field magic arrays were insanely rare among magic arrays, and if not for the chance to obtain one, he wouldn't have risked meeting the jealous witch. Excellent! Since you have opened this origin of sins, I'll give you a quest. Go and collect 200,000 magic crystals for me within 7 days. If you fail, you and all of Star Moon Kingdom will perish, the jealous witch announced. All right, you can leave now. Remember, you only have 7 days. With a wave of the jealous witch's hand, a bright flash blinded Sherfong. By the time Sherfang's vision recovered, he noticed that he had returned to the Million Forest. System, congratulations. You have accepted the inferior legendary quest. Witch's Sin. Quest content, collect 200,000 magic crystals in 7 days. Rewards unknown. Chapter 1910 Independent Mode. Chapter 1910 Independent Mode. Before Sherfong realized what was going on, he was back in the Million Forest. However, when he heard the system notification, the corners of his mouth twitched. 200,000 magic crystals. An inferior legendary quest. Not only was the quest more difficult than he remembered, but it also required an absurd number of magic crystals. Whether it was guilds or individual players, their magic crystal expenditure was continuously increasing. Although there were more magic crystal sources as players progressed further into the game, the number they could save up decreased. The current Zero Wing, in particular, was starving for magic crystals. Although Silverwing Town's teleportation service had increased the town's coin income significantly, it devoured magic crystals with frightening speed. Right now, the income from Silverwing Town's battle arena barely sustained the teleportation device's consumption. Moreover, Sherfong had to spend 20,000 magic crystals every 7 days to maintain the miniature world in the Ring of Gospel. Otherwise, the Ring of Gospel would crumble and disappear. In addition, Sherfong himself would receive a backlash, and his physique would permanently weaken by 30%. At this point, Zero Wing only had a little over 20,000 magic crystals to spare. If God's Domain's players had already reached level 100, even a first-rate guild could afford a 200,000 magic crystal price. But at this stage of the game, not even the various superpowers could likely pay. 7 days, is it? Sherfong fell deep into thought. While 7 days wasn't exactly a long time, it wasn't a very short one either. If he sold some held tanks to Unyielding Heart, Phoenix Rain, and Illusory Words, he should be able to gather so many magic crystals in time. However, doing so would rob Zero Wing of its monopoly over the held tanks. Moreover, nobody could guarantee that these held tanks wouldn't fall into the hands of Zero Wing's enemies. Yet if he did not sell them, he would have an extremely difficult time collecting 200,000 magic crystals in 7 days. It seems I'll have to take down Kama Island right now. No matter how Sherfong thought about it, the only reliable method he could think of was acquiring Kama Island's manatite vein. The other options were too risky. Some options even had the potential of disrupting Zero Wing's future development. Although they had accidentally discovered a source fire vein in the Flame Demon's Valley, its environment was too harsh for players to endure long-term. Aqua Rose and Melancholic Smile hadn't even finished the preparations to send people to the mine. Even if they could send people, they wouldn't be able to send many. After all, fire resistance equipment capable of allowing ordinary players to survive in the scorching environment was simply too rare. It was impossible to equip many players adequately. The manatite vein on Kama Island was much safer. Players could survive there so long as they had some darkness resistance. The problem could easily be dealt with via a darkness resistance potion. Furthermore, the area's low mana density wouldn't affect the mining player's performance. Thinking up to this point, Sherfone pulled the Abyss pendant from his bag and used Abyss teleport. He planned to rent a few more hotels and restaurants in the Sea of Trees before setting off for Kama Island. Meanwhile, inside the Evil God's branch temple in ancient Rock City, several dozen Great Lord-ranked evil beasts had been locked in a cave filled with bloodlust. They constantly fought, tearing each other apart, and the surviving evil beasts would devour any of their comrades that died. After fighting several minutes, only half of the several dozen Great Lords remained alive. One of the evil beasts, which had just finished cannibalizing another, began to transform, its muscles rapidly expanding. The evil energy it radiated grew denser, and after several seconds, the evil beast had become nearly 20% larger than the other monsters in the cave. This bloodlust crystal dark soul scent is quite impressive. It can actually increase the evolution success rate to Great Lord rank by 15%. After glancing at the evolving evil beast, Beast Emperor turned his attention to the crystal, which emitted its own bloodlust, in his hand with a soft smile. The partnership between the Evil God's Temple and Dark Soul had been far more effective than he had expected. He had thought that Dark Soul would be useful for acquiring materials and sacrificial players for Dust Edge at most. He hadn't expected the Alliance to acquire such a lively bloodlust crystal. As of late, his evil beast army had recovered plenty of its lost combat power. Although bloodlust crystals could only help evil beasts evolve to the Grand Lord rank, he now had far more Grand Lords under his command, and it would reduce the difficulty of nurturing mythic evil beasts. As long as he had enough mythic evil beasts, he could destroy Silverwing Town, even without Dark Soul and Blackwater's assistance. As Beast Emperor rejoiced over his newest Grand Lord-ranked evil beast, a tall, robust berserker with a giant axe across his back entered the cave. This was none other than Wind Hunter. "Boss, we've just received news from Starmoon Kingdom. For some reason, an Otherworld gate has appeared in the Witch's Hill. The gate allows passage to an Otherworld. Because of this development, a large number of players have swarmed to Zero Wing City. Some of the guilds in neighboring kingdoms and empires have also started to make their move," Wind Hunter reported with a grim expression. "Not only will this incident earn Zero Wing a small fortune, but based on our reports, over 20 well-known adventurer teams have also shown signs of merging with the guild. Should we send Dark Soul to eliminate a few of these teams and teach the public about the consequences of relying on Zero Wing? Well-known adventurer teams are joining Zero Wing?" Beast Emperor revealed a faint smile. "There's no need to involve Dark Soul. I recall that Dust Edge has conducted another evil dragonification experiment, correct? Take him to Zero Wing City to test out his new toy on the adventurer teams. We'll use this opportunity to warn those teams and ensure that they understand who is strongest in this war." "Understood. I'll ensure that these adventurer teams won't dare to set foot in Zero Wing City ever again," Wind Hunter said excitedly. He had seen the evil dragons Dust Edge produced. Although the creatures were incomplete, their combat power was astonishing. He didn't dare to imagine how powerful the complete evil dragons would be. As long as Dust Edge's experiments succeeded, the Evil God's Temple could expand its territory. Moreover, it would be able to do so boldly and without fear. "Good. Get it done quickly. Don't let the kingdom's army capture you." Beast Emperor nodded. "Boss, rest assured, by the time the kingdom's army arrives, the adventurer teams will be long dead," Wind Hunter said, licking his lips in anticipation. After Wind Hunter left, Beast Emperor proceeded to release a new batch of Great Lord-ranked evil beasts into the caver, starting another round of slaughter. Meanwhile, in Starmoon Kingdom's Zero Wing City, after spending 50,000 gold to rent another 15 hotels and restaurants in the Sea of Trees, Sherfone used a guild transfer scroll and returned to the guild residence in Zero Wing City. When he arrived, Sherfone left for the candlelight trading firm to prepare for his trip to Kama Island. However, as he reached the street outside of the residence, he was stunned by what he saw. The previously desolate central district was now crowded with players, many of which were members of the various large guilds. At a glance, Sherfone could spot over a dozen Tier 2 experts wandering the street. This prosperity could even rival an empire's imperial capital. As Sherfone was about to enter the candlelight trading firm, he heard the sound of a system notification. System, congratulations! Zero Wing City's player population has reached 8 million. Do you wish to activate independent mode and allow the Wargod's Temple to garrison the city? Chapter 1911 Wargod's Temple Garrisons in Zero Wing City. Chapter 1911 Wargod's Temple Garrisons in Zero Wing City. The city's development sure is fast. Sherfone could not help his elation when he heard the system notification. He had thought that Zero Wing City would need another 1 or 2 days to reach a player population of 8 million, even with the Otherworld gate, but only a few after the gate's activation had been announced, Zero Wing City had hit the mark. In God's domain, any guild city with a player population of 8 million would activate the independent mode. When this so-called independent mode activated, the city's NPCs would be liberated, allowing other NPC forces to intervene in the city's affairs. The buildings these NPC forces set up in the guild city wouldn't be subjected to players' management, which meant that these NPC forces took responsibility for their establishment's security, stationing their own guards. Although players would lose management rights over a portion of their guild city after activating independent mode, it would increase the city's security and convenience. The Wargod's Temple, for example, was one of the strongest NPC forces on the continent of God's domain. It had a branch in every NPC city. Once a guild city had a player population of 8 million, the Wargod's Temple could no longer ignore it. Thus, the Wargod's Temple had decided to garrison in Zero Wing City. Sherfone immediately agreed to activate independent mode, allowing the various NPC forces to enter Zero Wing City. After Sherfone agreed, Zero Wing City's layout appeared before him. The system requested that he select an area for the Wargod's Temple. The selected area had to be within the city's central district, and there was a strict size requirement. Fortunately, the Wargod's Temple would foot the construction fees. Since the Wargod's Temple had decided to garrison in Zero Wing City, the guild also acquired 10 bronze-ranked Wargod emblems. Players couldn't use the emblems as they were meant for NPC soldiers, and they increased the NPC's attributes and physique by 30% when worn. After Sherfone dealt with the Wargod's Temple, a towering building suddenly manifested in Zero Wing City's central district, attracting the attention of nearby players. Isn't that the Wargod's Temple? What's going on? The Wargod's Temple has garrisoned in Zero Wing City? Amazing! Zero Wing has actually lured in the Wargod's Temple? This is wonderful! I won't have to head to NPC cities to turn in the temple's quests anymore. Everyone was greatly shocked when they saw the towering Wargod's Temple. Almost every player in the game knew about the Wargod's Temple. Normally, players would visit the temple when they planned to pick up a quest. One reason for this was the items the Wargod's Temple offered for purchase. Raising their status with the temple was another reason. Now that the Wargod's Temple occupied Zero Wing City, it would save players plenty of trouble when trying to pick up or turn in quests related to the temple. Commander, look! That's the Wargod's Temple. Zero Wing really is amazing! With this, Zero Wing City's position in the Star Moon Kingdom has become even more stable. In addition, Zero Wing City is incredibly popular in the kingdom. With such potential and power, we'll grow a lot stronger if our unbounded adventurer team joins Zero Wing. A male swordsman in silver armor exclaimed to the scholarly, middle-aged man beside him. Zero Wing's development is indeed frightening. Despite starting without any support or background, it has become Star Moon Kingdom's #1 guild in such a short time. Now, it has even developed Zero Wing City to such a degree. It's no wonder why the various superpowers have started to pay attention to the guild, the middle-aged man said, gazing at the Wargod's Temple in admiration. As these two men conversed, several experts couldn't help but glance at them as they passed. These two men were simply too eye-catching. One of them was a level 56, Tier 2 swordsman, while the other was a level 57, Tier 2 berserker. They would definitely be considered peak experts in first-rate guilds. However, to everyone's surprise, either player wore a guild emblem. This meant that there was a high chance that these two were independent players. It was extremely difficult for independent players to grow so powerful at this stage of the game, and the amount of effort they must have put in was far more than the various large guilds' Tier 2 experts. "Commander, do you think Zero Wing will refuse our request this time?" the swordsman asked worriedly. "I'm not sure," the scholarly middle-aged man said, shaking his head. "But Unbounded is still a well-known adventurer team in the Purple Thorns Kingdom. Not only do we have nearly 1,000 members, but we also have several plots of land in the kingdom's important cities. I don't think Zero Wing will refuse our request." Before he had arrived in Zero Wing City, he had been fully confident in his adventurer team's chances of joining the guild, but once he had arrived in the city, he had realized that he had severely underestimated Zero Wing. However, after arriving in Zero Wing City, he realized that he had been severely underestimating the current Zero Wing. At this point, Zero Wing City was even more prosperous than the Purple Thorns Kingdom's capital. Moreover, as he gazed down the crowded street, most of the players he saw were experts. Tier 2 players were also a common sight. With how prosperous Zero Wing City was right now, the guild would have no trouble recruiting expert players. He had also heard that, aside from Unbounded, many well-known adventurer teams had petitioned to join Zero Wing. Based on his understanding of Zero Wing, the guild walked the path of the elite. Hence, Zero Wing's recruitment standards would be quite strict. Although Zero Wing was fully capable of recruiting a large number of players and strengthening the guild to a frightening degree, Zero Wing had refused to do so. Instead, it had invested more resources in a small number of elite and expert players. That decision had ensured that Zero Wing's elite and expert players were far higher quality than those in first-rate guilds. Even some of the ordinary superpowers were no match for Zero Wing in this regard. Meanwhile, with so many known adventurer teams applying to join Zero Wing, the guild naturally wouldn't accept every adventurer team. The guild would only recruit the most valuable adventurer teams. The swordsman used excitement dampened upon hearing his commander's reply. Even before the commander had announced that their adventurer team would attempt to join Zero Wing, he had possessed a deep understanding of the guild due to the battle between Zero Wing and Beast Emperor's armies near the primordial divine ruin. While that battle might not have been important to Zero Wing, it had left a deep impression on him, who had only been a Tier 1 swordsman at the time. Back then, Black Flame, Zero Wing's guild leader, had repelled a mythic monster with a single attack, shocking the spectating powers. Black Flame's prowess had even caused thousands of Blackwater's experts to freeze in fear. He had never imagined that a swordsman could be so strong. Had he not been a member of the Unbounded adventurer team back then, he might have applied to join Zero Wing. Hence, when he heard that his commander wanted Unbounded to merge with the guild, he had been overjoyed. When he heard that his commander intended to visit Zero Wing City to negotiate with the guild's upper echelons, he had been the first to apply to join his leader. Don't be so disappointed. Although Unbounded isn't a top adventurer team, it is one of the top 100 adventurer teams in the Purple Thorns Empire. Moreover, our adventurer team has as many as 4 Tier 2 players, and all 4 have cleared the hard mode class change quest. We have more of an advantage than the other teams that only challenge the normal mode quest, the middle-aged man said in consolation. All right, we should head to Zero Wing's residence. In response, the swordsman youth nodded. Meanwhile, 2 cloaked players a short distance away stared at the men from Unbounded. Sickle, those men are 2 of your targets. Remember to make as much of a commotion as possible. We need to teach Zero Wing and the other adventurer teams a lesson, Wind Hunter said, sneering as he gestured to Unbounded's players. Understood. The robust man named Dark Sickle nodded, a hint of excitement flashing in his eyes. Chapter 1912 Evil Dragon Appears. Chapter 1912 Evil Dragon Appears. Zero Wing City, Candlelight Trading Firm. When the system had announced the Otherworld Gate's activation, A large number of Star Moon Kingdom's independent players had flooded Zero Wing City. This also increased the number of players visiting the city's candlelight trading firm. Meanwhile, 3 cloaked players enjoyed a meal and admired the populated street from the second floor of an open-air restaurant opposite of the trading firm. If one used a high-ranking identification skill on these 3, they would definitely be surprised. None of these players were human. Among the 3, one was a beautiful female half-elf, one was a female catkin with cat ears and tail, and one was a male tigerkin with a powerful, robust body. All 3 were members of the Ninth Heaven Guild, with the female half-elf being Melody, Ninth Heaven's guild leader. Big Sis Melody, this city is so prosperous, even more so than our forest city. I can see more than 100 Tier 2 experts from here. The catkin, Scarlet Heart, said, watching the sea of players downstairs with a shocked expression. Indeed. I never thought that a kingdom's guild city could develop to this extent. Melody was similarly surprised by the number of Tier 2 experts roaming the street below. Before coming to Star Moon Kingdom, she had specifically asked Thoughtful Rain about Zero Wing's current state of affairs. However, she couldn't believe Thoughtful Rain's reply. Thoughtful Rain had mentioned that Zero Wing City's player population had already reached 5 million, and experts were a common sight in the city. Moreover, Zero Wing City had many rare items for sale. Based on these descriptions, Zero Wing City sounded no less successful than Forest City. How could that possibly be true? However, when she had arrived in the city, she discovered that it was far more well-off than Thoughtful Rain had described. In Zero Wing City, expert players were as common as ordinary players, and plenty of Tier 2 experts wandered the city streets. Tier 2 experts were very rare, even in Forest City. Even Ninth Heaven, which was almost as powerful as a first-rate guild, had only nurtured around 30 Tier 2 experts thus far. However, the number of Tier 2 experts on the street outside of the restaurant already outnumbered Ninth Heaven's. If even Zero Wing City was so popular, she couldn't imagine how strong Zero Wing had already become. Guild leader, although Zero Wing is stronger than we expected, I doubt it can help our guild. Our current opponent is the legendary Death God Workshop. The Death God Workshop has even provoked super guilds before, and none of them could do anything about it, closing an eye to the workshop's transgressions. The tigerkin named One-Arm Rashoman said worriedly. On the other hand, the Setting Sun Guild is more reliable. Moreover, guild leader, your family has a close relationship with Setting Sun's guild leader. Whether it is for profit or that relationship, Setting Sun will go all out to help our guild. In addition, the Death God Workshop would, more or less, fear of the strength of a recently promoted super first-rate guild like Setting Sun and might give up on targeting us. Stop. While Setting Sun might be stronger than Zero Wing, Setting Sun's condition requires Ninth Heaven to become its subordinate. I will never agree to that, even if I have to fight the Death God Workshop to the death. Melody's voice was frosty. Her guild had gone to great lengths to complete the high-ranked quest in the Flame Demon's Valley and acquired a precious treasure. However, an information leak had informed the Death God Workshop of their new acquisition, and the workshop had attacked Ninth Heaven to steal the treasure. The Death God Workshop was not a guild. It was an organized adventurer team. Not only were its movements erratic, but the adventurer team also had its fair share of experts. Moreover, as an adventurer team, the Death God Workshop did not have a permanent base of operations. But Ninth Heaven was different. The guild had already grown considerably large and secured a permanent base of operations. One could easily imagine the outcome of a struggle between the two organizations. The Death God Workshop always had the initiative in battle. Moreover, the Death God Workshop also had experts that could even contend with Super Guild's peak experts. The workshop's members had used guerrilla tactics against Ninth Heaven's players, and the guild had been powerless to stop them. Big Sis Melody, it's almost time. Rain and Blue should have returned to Zero Wing's residence by now, Scarlet Heart said as she checked the time. All right, let's go. Taking a look herself, Melody noticed that it was nearly time to meet with Thoughtful Rain. She immediately stood to leave the restaurant. Meanwhile, Dark Sickle stood on a street corner not far from the candlelight trading firm. He quietly stalked the two unbounded members. The two members of the adventurer team were utterly unaware of their stalker. This should be enough, people. I should be able to cause quite a commotion. Dark Sickle, who wore a black cloak and only had his eyes exposed, licked his lips in anticipation as he observed his surroundings. The task Wind Hunter had given him was simple. Kill the adventurer team members who had come to join Zero Wing, and kill as many bystanders as possible. This would send a message to every player in Starmoon Kingdom, teaching them the consequences of joining Zero Wing and proving that they weren't safe even in a guild city protected by NPC soldiers. If he succeeded, not only would the various adventurer teams receive the warning, but all players would realize that Zero Wing City was dangerous, and they could lose their lives at any given moment. This would cripple Zero Wing City's popularity. In the past, he might have feared the NPC soldiers patrolling the city streets, but now that he could transform into an evil dragon, not even level 80, Tier 3 NPCs could pose a threat, much less level 80, Tier 2 NPC soldiers. All he needed to worry about was the kingdom's army. After all, the NPCs in the kingdom's army were all above level 100. Killing him would be a piece of cake for them. However, he had a Tier 3 instantaneous movement magic scroll on him. If the kingdom's army arrived before he escaped, he could still leave the area. Attack! Wind Hunter, who watched the two unbounded members from afar, commanded Dark Sickle through their party chat. Hearing this, Dark Sickle removed a crimson crystal from his bag and shattered it. As the crimson crystal shattered, energy flowed into Dark Sickle's body. In the next moment, the magic circuits drawn on his skin disintegrated as if some seal had been removed. Once the magic circuits had disintegrated, Dark Sickle howled as his muscles rapidly expanded, his sudden growth tearing his black cloak to shreds. When passers-by saw Dark Sickle's growing form, they were dumbfounded. Before these players could react, Dark Sickle transformed into a 10-meter-tall evil dragon. Roar! After completing his transformation, Dark Sickle released a deafening roar, echoing throughout the city's central district. A dragon? What's going on? Why has a dragon suddenly appeared? The players on the street panicked when they saw the evil dragon. They could feel the threat of death emanating from the creature. With a flap of his newly grown wings, Dark Sickle shot into the air above the two unbounded players. Unbounded adventurer team, since you dare attempt to join Zero Wing, you will suffer the consequences. Dark Sickle shouted before swiping at the swordsman and berserker with a claw. Die! Both the scholarly berserker and the swordsman youth felt powerless against the massive, incoming claw. They had only caught a glimpse of the claw's afterimage, and the power it contained was so great that space around it had become unstable. However, just as the dragon claw was about to strike the two players, everyone saw a blue flash before an agonized cry filled the air. The evil dragon flew over a dozen yards backward before crashing heavily into the ground, the impact leaving a crater under the creature. This outcome dumbfounded the surrounding players once more. Chapter 1913 Commotion at Zero Wing on the crowded street. Chapter 1913 Commotion at Zero Wing on the crowded street. When the two unbounded members saw the evil dragon crash into the ground some distance away, they were dazed for a short moment, failing to process what had just happened. What's going on? We didn't die? Stubborn Bone, Unbounded's commander, stared at the small crater a little over a dozen yards away from him, and the evil dragon lying in it with a befuddled expression. A second ago, he had heard the evil dragon state its intent to kill him and his companion. When the creature's claw attack had descended on them, he had known their deaths were sealed. The attack had been too fast for either of them to keep up with, much less block or dodge. Yet, after a bright, blue flash, the mighty evil dragon had vanished, crashing into the ground some distance away. Once his mind began to work again, Stubborn Bones spun towards the origin of the blue flash, discovering a cloaked player wielding a blue longsword who was slowly walking towards the evil dragon. Was it him? Stubborn Bones stared at the cloaked player in disbelief. He found it truly hard to believe that an attack from a one-handed sword could send such a powerful and fast evil dragon flying. Crap! What's going on? Why is a dragon in the city? That's not right. Look at the marker above the dragon's head. That's a player's marker. That dragon is a player. I think I heard the dragon say that it was going to kill the adventurer teams that tried to join Zero Wing. By the looks of it, the dragon seems to have some kind of grudge with Zero Wing. But what happened just now? I only saw the dragon begin its rampage, and before I realized it, the creature had been thrown. The players on the street couldn't help but discuss Dark Sickle's sudden attack. The situation confused them. When the various major powers' upper echelons on the street saw the gigantic evil dragon, realization dawned on them. Isn't that the evil god's temple's evil dragon? Ha! This is interesting. It seems the evil god's temple can no longer sit still after watching Zero Wing City's rapid development. I wonder how Zero Wing will deal with this problem? This evil dragon is clearly much stronger than the ones over at the Dark Witch's Tower. Even the NPC soldiers should be powerless against it. Good. Keep making trouble. Once Zero Wing City's fame is ruined, our guilds will have a better chance of luring the Witches' Hills players later. The various guild upper echelons watched Dark Sickle, who stood back up and seemed mostly unharmed, with anticipation. They hoped that Dark Sickle would cause a large enough commotion in the city that they could take advantage of, attracting more players to the guild towns they would build in the near future. Who are you? You dare to make an enemy of the evil god's temple? As Dark Sickle regained his footing, he glared at the cloaked man wielding the blue longsword, his voice echoing throughout the central district as he spoke. Zero Wing's black flame, Sherfong said, chuckling as he took off his black cloak. Satisfied? You. How? Dark Sickle's anger vanished when he saw Sherfong, and he was abruptly alert. When the spectators saw Sherfeng's appearance, they could not help but gape. What? It's the Sword King? Lucky! I never thought I would get to meet the legendary Black Flame on my first visit to Zero Wing City. Amazing! I can boast about this when I meet up with my friends later. After a moment of silence, the crowd erupted into a round of cheers. Not only was Black Flame's name known by all in Star Moon Kingdom, but many players also revered him to a fanatical degree. This swordsman had been responsible for many miracles in the kingdom, and a large portion of players trying to join Zero Wing did so because of his presence in the guild. Why wouldn't they be excited now that he had shown up in Zero Wing City? Damn it, why is Black Flame here? When the various guild upper echelons saw Sherfong, their expressions darkened. They knew what kind of strength Black Flame possessed. When the man went all out, he could even stand toe-to-toe with a mythic monster for a short time. With Black Flame here, the evil dragon would likely fail to cause any trouble in Zero Wing City. Black Flame? Stubborn Bone was dazed once more as Sherfong walked past him. Amazing! As expected of the Sword King. Just the mention of his name is enough to make that dragon panic. The swordsman youth beside Stubborn Bone was ecstatic to see Sherfong, his eyes practically sparkling. After this turn of events, he was even more resolved to join Zero Wing. Meanwhile, when Melody's group of three, who had just stepped out of the open-air restaurant opposite of the Candlelight Trading Firm, saw this scene, they could not help but reveal astonished expressions. What's going on? Why are these people so excited? Scarlet Heart muttered strangely. Although Sherfeng's attack had been stunning, it hadn't been impressive enough to warrant such a crazed reaction from the crowd. After all, the evil dragon wasn't even injured. It had merely lost a few tens of thousands of HP. To the evil dragon, who had over 30 million HP, the damage was nothing. It's probably because of Black Flame's fame in Star Moon Kingdom, Melody deduced. She, too, was confused by the spectators' reactions. Although some players were very famous, this was the first time she had seen such an exaggerated reaction over an expert player. In fact, when Sherfong revealed himself, the evil dragon, which had bubbled with rage a moment ago, trembled in fear. Are you guys not from Star Moon Kingdom or the neighboring kingdoms? A level 56, Tier 1 assassin, who had overheard Melody and Scarlet Heart's conversation, asked. We came from somewhere far away. Melody nodded, confirming the assassin's assumption. So, that's the case. I guess it's normal that you don't understand the situation. Black Flame is our kingdom's publicly acknowledged #1 expert. With his strength alone, he caused an army of 10,000 to freeze in fear. There are rumors that he's actually a humanoid monster or NPC. He even soloed and overpowered a mythic monster in the Or Empire. Dealing with great lord-ranked monsters is a piece of cake for him. The assassin explained with a reverential look. Soloing a mythic monster? And he overpowered it? How? One-armed Rashoman stated in amazement. Mythic monsters were still invincible to players at this stage of the game. Even peak Tier 2 MTs had an extremely difficult time surviving against mythic monsters, not to mention overpowering one. So, it's guild leader Black Flame. The evil god's temple has a grudge against these two. I am simply here to teach them a lesson. This matter does not concern Zero Wing. Once I finish these two off, I'll leave the city. However, if you try to stop me, don't blame me for causing a scene. Dark Sickle said, grinning once he had calmed down. His previous fear had simply been due to Black Flame's name. After all, the man was a living legend. He had even slain 2 evil dragon experts at the Dark Witch's Tower. It was only natural for him to be afraid. However, when he gave the matter a little more thought, he remembered that he was much stronger than the 2 evil dragons Shifeng had faced. Although he was only at the Tier 3 archaic species standard, he had gained a 5-level boost after transforming. Hence, he was now a level 62, Tier 3 archaic species. To monsters, an additional 5 levels was a massive attribute boost. With such an advantage, he had no reason to fear Black Flammel. Moreover, with his combat standard, not even a Tier 4 NPC could stop him quickly if he wanted to cause a ruckus in Zero Wing City, much less a Tier 2 player. Sure. Give it a try, if you dare. Shifeng growled softly. Chapter 1914 Elemental Oppression. Chapter 1914 Elemental Oppression. When Shifeng fell silent, the crowd couldn't help but grow nervous. They hadn't expected Shifeng to ignore Dark Sickle's threat. The evil dragon was a level 62, Tier 3 archaic species. If Dark Sickle truly intended to cause trouble, they had no doubt that they'd be the first to get dragged into the mess. Even if the city's NPC soldiers arrived to deal with this player, it wouldn't stop Dark Sickle from slaughtering the spectators. Unlike monsters, players couldn't be aggroed. Dark Sickle could simply ignore the NPCs and massacre players as he wished. With how powerful the evil dragon's attacks were, most players would die in one hit. Only those with invulnerability skills might survive. They were merely bystanders. It was unreasonable for them to get dragged into this. When Dark Sickle heard Shifeng's response, he was stunned. He hadn't expected that. Good! You've forced my hand! Dark Sickle bellowed as he glared at Shifeng. Let me see whether or not you are worthy of your title as the Sword King! Dark Sickle flapped his wings, his massive body transforming into a gale that swept toward Shifeng. The windstorm was so powerful that it blew the surrounding players off their feet. Even the Tier 2 players barely kept their footing. It took only an instant for Dark Sickle to cross the 20 yards between him and Shifeng. As he arrived before the swordsman, he swung his claw at the man. As Stubborn Bone, who stood behind Shifeng, felt the attack's intense pressure, he felt his body grow heavy. However, despite the approaching attack, Shifeng made no attempt to dodge. Instead, his body lit with a golden light as he countered the attack with a swing of Killing Ray. Boom! With the sound of an explosion, the marble under Shifeng's feet cracked. As the powerful storm subsided, and everyone could reopen their eyes, the unbelievable scene before them left them astounded. Shifeng's long sword had actually stopped the evil dragon's gigantic claw. He blocked it. Everyone was shocked when they saw that Shifeng had only taken a few steps back after receiving the attack. Everyone had a very clear understanding of the evil dragon's strength. Moreover, the creature was ridiculously fast. Current players had no hope against this evil dragon. Yet Shifeng had stopped its attack. So what if you blocked a casual strike? I wonder how long you can keep it up? Dark Sickle sneered. Although Shifeng had blocked his attack, He knew that both his strength and speed were superior to Shifeng's. Meanwhile, Shifeng's berserk skill had a limited duration, and he hadn't even gotten serious yet. Dark Sickle proceeded to brandish his claws, sending countless afterimages flying at Shifeng. When the crowd saw the innumerable afterimages, they were momentarily stunned. If they were in Shifeng's position, they wouldn't have any way to nullify the attack. They had never thought that a player-controlled monster would be so horrifically powerful. Unlike players, monsters couldn't fully exhibit their combat power, and they couldn't execute rapid chain attacks, which was why players had a chance of defeating them. But as these players watched the evil dragon's attacks, they were overcome with despair, instinctively giving up on any form of resistance. Finally getting serious? Shifeng wasn't particularly surprised to see the approaching afterimages. Immediately, he unsheathed the abyssal blade and brandished both swords. Purgatory Pentaslash. Shadow Blade. One sword light after another flew from Shifeng's hands and clashed with the claw afterimages, sparks and sounds of explosions filling the air. The exchanges between Shifeng and Dark Sickle were so fast that not even the surrounding Tier 2 experts could discern what was happening. They could only hear the booms as a strong wind pushed against them. Too strong! Black Flame can actually fight that powerful evil dragon to a standstill? Is he really a player? An indescribable shock filled the spectators as they watched the showdown between a human and a dragon. As for Dark Sickle, the more he fought, the more frightened he became. He clearly had the advantage when it came to strength and speed, yet Shifeng's swords always deflected his attacks as the swordsman employed an impeccable defense, and only lost a small amount of HP from each clash. Even after more than 10 seconds, Shifeng hadn't even lost 10% of his HP. Big Sis Melody, Black Flame is ridiculously strong. He can actually face off against a player with the strength of a Tier 3 archaic species. If Black Flame is willing to help us, we might be able to resolve the matter with the Death God Workshop. She was breathless, yet Shifeng's breathing remained steady despite such an intense battle. Black Flame is quite powerful, but at the end of the day, he's still using a berserk skill. He can't keep this up for long. Once his skill's duration is over, he won't be able to stop the evil dragon. We should leave quickly, One-Armed Rashomon said worriedly. There's no need to be afraid. We're in a guild city. There are plenty of NPC soldiers nearby. That evil dragon can't keep fighting for long either, Melody said as she turned to look at Zero Wing City's NPC soldiers, who had just arrived. The first NPC soldiers to arrive were a 20-man patrol squad, and every soldier was a level 80, Tier 2 NPC. Upon arriving, the NPCs attacked Dark Sickle without hesitation. As these Tier 2 NPCs received an attribute boost from the city's core magic array, their strength could rival great lords of the same level. Due to the NPC soldiers' participation, Shifeng's situation turned for the better. One of the Tier 2 cleric NPCs immediately cast Recovery on Shifeng, granting him an hot buff. Meanwhile, several MTs carrying shields quickly formed a defensive wall before Shifeng, severely hindering the evil dragon's attacks, while several ranged NPCs bombarded Dark Sickle with attacks, depleting the evil dragon's HP by tens of thousands. Although Dark Sickle still had the upper hand, it was only a matter of time before his HP was whittled down to nothing. Black Flame, I have underestimated you, but you still can't stop me if I target other players. When Dark Sickle saw the growing NPC crowd around him, he realized that continuing his fight with Shifeng would be detrimental. He then shifted his gaze to Unbounded's two members, sneering as he said, "I'll show you the price of angering me." After saying so, Dark Sickle flapped his wings and dashed towards Stubborn Bone and the swordsman youth. Since his strength and speed were so much greater than Shifeng and the Tier 2 NPC soldiers, it only took him a second to shake them off and reach the Unbounded duo. "Elemental Oppression!" Shifeng shouted. Suddenly, a beam of light shot up from each of the 4 towers of elements, located in Zero Wing City's 4 corners. A colossal magic array enveloped the city from above, freezing space within the city's walls. Every player in the city felt their bodies become indescribably heavy. As for Dark Sickle, It felt as if his body had been submerged in a pool of water. Now, it took a lot more effort to move his claws, decreasing his attack speed by more than 50%. After activating elemental oppression, Shifeng used Instant Strike to appear before Dark Sickle. He then swung Killing Ray at the evil dragon's descending claw. Pun! After repelling the attack, Shifeng thrust the abyssal blade towards Dark Sickle. Although the evil dragon saw the attack and tried to intercept it with his other claw, he was simply too slow to keep up with Shifeng's strike. Suddenly, Dark Sickle felt pain in his chest before his body was thrown backward, the attack's outcome surprising him. Chapter 19:15 Might of the Four Towers of Elements. He sent the dragon flying? Chapter 19:15 Might of the Four Towers of Elements. He sent the dragon flying? The crowd stared in shock as Shifeng threw the evil dragon backward by over a dozen yards. A moment ago, Shifeng had clearly been at a disadvantage, yet he had just sent this intruder flying. Moreover, he had done so with a normal attack. Damn it! Why does this city have such a powerful domain magic array? Dark Sickle glared at the magic barrier above the city with a grim expression. Due to this magic array, his mobility had been reduced by at least half. Moreover, his basic attributes had decreased by as much as 40%. This drop in his performance was the reason that Shifeng had succeeded in throwing him so far with a simple, normal attack. A domain magic array! So, this is Zero Wing City's trump card? Although the magic array's powerful suppression only targeted Dark Sickle, the various guild upper echelons realized what had happened. The previous exchange's unexpected outcome hadn't been a result of Shifeng's strength. Rather, it had been because the magic array, which had abruptly appeared above the city, had drastically weakened Dark Sickle. The magic array must be particularly powerful since an ordinary array wouldn't be enough to suppress a Tier 3 archaic species to this extent. After Shifeng repulsed Dark Sickle, the 20 NPC soldiers moved to surround him. They had no problem suppressing Dark Sickle now, dealing over -100,000 damage with each attack. No matter how much Dark Sickle struggled, he couldn't break free from the NPC's encirclement. He couldn't even get close to any of the surrounding players, much less kill them. How is this possible? Wind Hunter, who watched from a safe distance, frowned. He hadn't expected Zero Wing City to possess such powerful defenses. Not only did the city possess a defensive magic array, but it was also a domain magic array. He had used a precious disguise tool to sneak Dark Sickle into the city, yet his efforts had gone to waste. Now Dark Sickle couldn't even manage to kill a single ordinary player, much less the two unbounded members. If this battle continued, Dark Sickle would be the only player to die. Boss Wind, more NPCs are gathering to my location. I can't hold on at this rate. If I'm going to cause any damage to Zero Wing City, I'm afraid that I'll have to use that move. Dark Sickle contacted Wind Hunter while defending himself against the NPC soldiers. His evil dragonification was far different from the first attempts. Not only had it granted him a level boost, but he could also use an overture spell while in his evil dragon form. However, this overture spell was still one of the evil god's temple's secrets. He couldn't reveal it to the public unless absolutely necessary. Yet, he could only deal a significant blow to Zero Wing City if he used this overture spell now. The Tier 3 instantaneous movement magic scroll he had prepared was his only other option of escape. After giving the matter some thought, Wind Hunter gnashed his teeth and reluctantly agreed. Use it! Although this will expose the evil dragon's true strength earlier than planned, it is better than leaving the city without accomplishing anything. Dust Edge had warned him that the evil dragonification process was still incomplete, and as a result, casting its overture spell would require a heavy price. If Dark Sickle used the overture spell now, it might even cancel his evil dragonification. But he couldn't care less right now. If they escaped without accomplishing anything in Zero Wing City, the evil god's temple would be a laughingstock, and Zero Wing would become even more famous. Once he had permission to use the overture spell, Dark Sickle's worries vanished. Now, he was overcome with mad excitement. Black Flame, I'll show you the true price of defying me. Dark Sickle snarled as he glared at Sherfone, ignoring the surrounding NPC's attacks. Suddenly, the evil energy around his body skyrocketed, and his aura intensified. 12 pitch-black magic arrays manifested around Dark Sickle, each opening a hole in space as a flood of evil energy poured out and into Dark Sickle's draconic form. A ball of black light then formed before the evil dragon, gradually expanding. Tier 4 Overture Spell, Evil Energy Burst. When cast, this spell would absorb evil energy from other planes and deal devastating damage to a 300-yard radius. With how crowded Zero Wing City's central district currently was, such an AoE would devour several thousand players. Crap! That evil dragon is trying to use a large-scale destruction spell! We need to get out of here! Melody's expression darkened as destructive energy filled Dark Sickle's surroundings. All of the spectating magical class players could feel the large-scale destruction spell Dark Sickle was preparing to cast. They immediately turned and tried to flee. Running? Dark Sickle sneered at the fleeing players. I can collect all the energy I need in 2 more seconds. Do you think you can run 300 yards that quickly? Hearing Dark Sickle's taunt, the fleeing players despaired. Damned lunatic! We're only visiting Zero Wing City, yet you're attacking us too? Evil God's Temple, just you wait. I won't let you get away with this. The spectating players realized that escape was impossible. Aside from the NPCs and players with invulnerability skills, all of these players would likely die. Ha! Excellent! The Evil God's Temple has done a good job this time. I can't wait to see who would dare develop in Zero Wing City after today. The Evil God's Temple is ruthless, attacking Zero Wing City so soon after Zero Wing attacked Ancient Rock City. It seems Zero Wing will have a hard time developing further. The various guild upper echelons watching from a distance laughed as Dark Sickle prepared his large-scale destruction spell. Not only had the Evil God's Temple managed to sneak an evil dragon into Zero Wing City, but the evil dragon in question could also cast a large-scale destruction spell. After this, no player would feel safe visiting Zero Wing City in the future. Meanwhile, this situation would grant their guilds an opportunity to develop in the Witch's Hill. Die! Dark Sickle bellowed, madness filling his eyes as he glared at Sherfone, who stood unmoving before the 2 unbounded members. Suddenly, the pitch-black light ball before the evil dragon rapidly expanded. Like a black hole that devoured everything, the light ball all in its path with evil energy. Even elemental suppression is useless? A cold glint flashed in Sherfang's eyes as he stared at the expanding ball of light. What about this, then? Saying so, Sherfang activated the 4 Towers of Elements' second killing move. Tier 4 Curse, Elemental Burst. The 4 Towers of Elements were one of God's domain's peak defensive structures. Even after 10 years in the game, the various super guilds had continued to protect their cities with the 4 Towers of Elements, due to their 3 killing moves. Elemental Suppression, a domain magic array that drastically weakened enemies' combat powers, both in and outside of the city, was the tower's first move. The second move was Elemental Burst, a Tier 4 curse that rivaled a Tier 5 spell. Even Tier 5 existences would not dare to take this move head-on. The third move was Elemental Seal, a spell that even Tier 5 beings were afraid of. Of course, unlike the first 2 moves, which only required a small number of magic crystals, activating Elemental Seal required mana stones. As Sherfang activated Elemental Burst, a 4-colored beam descended from the magic array above Zero Wing City, slamming into Dark Sickle and the black light ball before him. By the time the light faded, only an empty crater, over 10 meters deep, remained. Chapter 1916 Fame Spreads. The Evil Dragon is dead. Chapter 1916 Fame Spreads. The Evil Dragon is dead. Impossible! That's a Tier 3 archaic species we're talking about. The spectating players gaped at the deep crater in the middle of the street, utterly frozen in shock. They had thought that their deaths were certain a moment ago, but in the next second, the evil dragon, which had been about to release a large-scale destruction spell, had died. It had been so thoroughly destroyed that not even ashes remained. So strong! That attack instantly killed the half HP dragon. Big Sis Melody, do you think that Zero Wing launched that attack just now? Scarlet Heart asked, overcome with shock. Although the evil dragon had lost a lot of HP during its fight against the NPC soldiers, it had over 15 million HP just a second ago. However, when the four-colored light pillar had descended, the evil dragon hadn't even had time to scream before it had been destroyed. This was the first time she had witnessed such a devastating attack since joining God's domain. Not even a Tier 4 large-scale destruction spell could compare. Such a powerful attack would likely even injure mythic monsters. That's likely. But Zero Wing City's defenses truly are terrifying to annihilate a Tier 3 archaic species in one hit. I doubt other guilds have a chance of competing with Zero Wing in the Witch's Hill now, Melody said as she marveled at the magic barrier enveloping Zero Wing City. If Ninth Heaven's Guild Town were as powerful as Zero Wing City, it wouldn't have any problems dealing with the Death God Workshop. When players chose a guild town to visit, the most important aspect they took into account was the town's security. Whether it was independent players or merchant players, nobody wanted to die for no reason, wasting all of the effort they spent on leveling. Not only did Zero Wing City provide such a comfortable living environment, but its defenses were also immensely powerful. If they had the option, players would definitely choose to operate out of this city. What was that spell? Dark Sickle's magic resistance should have been boosted after transforming into an evil dragon. How could he have died despite still having over half of his HP? Wind Hunter's expression twisted when he saw the crater, void of the evil dragon. Although Dark Sickle was only a member of the second batch of experiments, the evil god's temple had spent a lot of resources on Dark Sickle's evil dragonification. Now that Dark Sickle was dead, those resources were gone. This outcome wouldn't have been so terrible if Dark Sickle had damaged Zero Wing City, but he hadn't even killed a single player. All Dark Sickle had accomplished was further solidifying the public's confidence in this city, which was the exact opposite of the evil god's temple's goal. The various guild upper echelons watching from a distance were in a similarly gloomy mood. Not only had Zero Wing City revealed its powerful domain magic array, but it also had command of such a powerful offensive spell. If any power had still harbored ideas of causing trouble in this city, they'd likely abandon the idea after today's display. I have to report this to the guild leader right away. Zero Wing City actually has such frightening defensive measures. It seems that we'll need to alter our plans and give up on the idea of harassing the city. We'll have to build a guild town in the Witch's Hill as soon as possible if we hope to compete with Zero Wing City. After this battle, the various guild upper echelons promptly reported to their respective superiors. They suggested that their guilds shift their focus to constructing a town in the map as soon as they could and avoid interfering with Zero Wing City's operations. If even a Tier 3 archaic species failed to cause trouble in the city, their guild's attempts would be an utter joke. Meanwhile, Sherfone, standing some distance away from the new crater, wasn't surprised in the least that Dark Sickle had died so quickly. Immediately, he instructed some of his NPCs to repair the damaged street and disperse the crowd, quickly ending this farce. The four towers of elements could even threaten a Tier 5 being, much less a Tier 3 evil dragon. This was also why he had stationed the Magic King in Silverwing Town instead of Zero Wing City. Once the lively Central District had returned to its former state, Sherfone called up Zero Wing City's system interface and selected 10 Tier 2 NPC soldiers with the most potential. He then armed them with the Bronze Wargod emblems. Although the Bronze Wargod emblems' effects would not help these Tier 2 NPC soldiers reach the Tier 3 standard, it pushed them quite close to it. Even if a level 80 Grand Lord came to cause trouble, a patrol squad with one of these pseudo-Tier 3 NPCs could keep the creature busy until other squads arrived with the 4 Towers of Elements elemental suppression. If possible, Sherfone preferred to avoid using Elemental Bust. After all, the Tier 4 curse cost 2,000 magic crystals each time it activated. It was a considerable expenditure to Zero Wing. Meanwhile, news of the commotion in Zero Wing City quickly spread throughout Starmoon Kingdom. Players bombarded the kingdom's forums with discussions about the event. Tier 3 Evil Dragon appears in Zero Wing City. Tier 3 archaic species gets instant killed. The various discussions on the forums brought Zero Wing City into a new light for the kingdom's players. Some independent players and adventurer teams, who hadn't been particularly interested in the city, decided to shift their base of operations to Zero Wing City. In God's domain, NPC cities were the safest locations for player residences. Hence, many players preferred to develop in NPC cities that lacked resources rather than in cities with abundant resources and lacking security. After all, the cost of death was simply too high. They would rather level up at a slower pace than take such a risk. However, the situation had changed. Since Zero Wing City could even instant kill a Tier 3 archaic species, it was more than capable of doing the same for current players. If any player dared to cause trouble in the city, they'd suffer a similar fate as the evil dragon. One could say that Zero Wing City was now even safer than an ordinary NPC city. It also provided many benefits and occupied a resource-rich area. For a time, a large number of players in Star Moon Kingdom started to migrate to Zero Wing City, awaiting the Otherworld Gate's activation. In less than half an hour, Zero Wing City's player population had reached 10 million. Although many more players tried to enter the city, it had reached its maximum capacity. If players wished to enter the city, they would have to wait for others to leave it. Due to this, more than 100 adventurer teams now petitioned to join Zero Wing. Every one of these adventurer teams contacted Aqua Rose in the hopes that she could facilitate their merger, offering resources and lands that tempted the Zero Wing Vice Guild leader. One adventurer team's resources might not be a match for a large guild's, but over 100 teams combined would have a frightening amount. Furthermore, many of the teams applying to join Zero Wing were well-known adventurer teams from Star Moon Kingdom and other countries. Their resources and lands were things that Zero Wing severely lacked. Because of this, Aqua Rose was at a loss, unsure of which adventurer teams to accept into the guild. Meanwhile, Melody, Scarlet Heart, and One-Arm Rashomon waited at the entrance to Zero Wing's guild residence. As they gazed at the many adventurer teams lined up to join the guild, they couldn't help their growing nerves. Big Sis Melody, with how powerful Zero Wing is right now, do you think guild leader Black Flame will accept our request? With the remuneration we plan to offer? Scarlet Heart asked nervously as she looked at the Tier 2 experts of the various adventurer teams entering Zero Wing's residence. These well-known adventurer teams all had a lot of resources and land saved up. Even so, they were still willing to hand everything over to Zero Wing in the hopes of merging their entire adventurer team with the guild. Compared to what these adventurer teams were offering, the remuneration they had prepared in exchange for Zero Wing's help with the Death God workshop was simply, "I don't know. We'll only find out once we've started the negotiations," Melody said, shaking her head. She wasn't particularly confident about their chances either. The only thing they could do was rely on their relationship with Thoughtful Rain. Chapter 1917 Forest City Transaction Zero Wing City, Zero Wing's Residence. Chapter 1917 Forest City Transaction Zero Wing City, Zero Wing's Residence. A large number of players crowded around the residence's entrance, applying to join Zero Wing. Many of these players were well-equipped, high-level experts, and quite a few were Tier 2 players. This scene surprised many passers-by. Tier 2 was currently the symbol of an expert. Even players that had only completed the normal mode promotion quest were considered experts. After all, the Tier 2 promotion quest was not easy to clear. It was impossible without reaching a certain standard. However, compared to the Tier 2 players outside of the residence, the adventurer teams in line truly dumbfounded the nearby spectators. Every adventurer team entering Zero Wing's residence possessed a certain degree of fame. Moreover, all of the team's representatives wore excellent equipment, with a few wearing level 50 fine gold equipment. There were also plenty of Tier 2 experts among these adventurer teams, and unlike the independent Tier 2 experts in line, the weakest among these adventurer team experts had completed the hard mode promotion quest. They had far more potential than the experts that had only completed the normal mode quest. With so many adventurer teams seeking to join Zero Wing, Zero Wing's strength will quickly and significantly increase. Amazing! I've seen more than 20 adventurer teams entering the residence thus far, Combined, these adventurer teams have even more overall combat power than third-rate guilds. Hopefully, Zero Wing doesn't accept too many. Otherwise, independent players like us will have a much slimmer chance of joining the guild. The independent players in line were excited and worried as they watched the various adventurer teams following after Zero Wing's representatives. Now that Zero Wing City had revealed its powerful defenses, countless players wanted to develop in the city. Zero Wing's future was clear. Even if the guild lost its position in the Or Empire, its standing in Star Moon Kingdom would be unshakable. To the general populace, Zero Wing was even stronger than a first-rate guild that occupied 2 or 3 kingdoms. A first-rate guild that occupied 2 or 3 kingdoms might have a lot of resources, but its development couldn't be considered stable. There was still a very high chance that other guilds would steal its resources. However, that was not the case for Zero Wing. As long as Zero Wing City stood, the guild's position in the kingdom would remain stable. With how powerful Zero Wing City's defenses were, it was very hard to imagine any power capturing or destroying the city. Even if a power were capable of doing so, it wouldn't likely be interested in a backwater country like Star Moon Kingdom. They'd definitely set their sights on better territories. While the crowd outside of the residence discussed Zero Wing's future, 2 women emerged from the residence. The moment these 2 women appeared, the crowd outside went into an uproar. This reaction wasn't due to the women's peerless beauty, but because of the guild emblems pinned to their armor. Not only did they wear mysterious iron guild emblems, but the emblems also radiated a dark purple glow. In Zero Wing, normal members didn't wear glowing guild emblems. Players would only get a glowing emblem once they became one of the guild's elites, their emblem emitting a light blue glow. The guild's core members wore guild emblems that gave off a light purple glow. Only the players who ranked in the top 10 of their class would wear a dark purple glowing emblem. Zero Wing's class rankings were determined by one's contribution to the guild and their combat power. Hence, the rankings were an incredibly reliable method of spotting an expert. The fact that these 2 women wore dark purple glowing guild emblems meant that they both had extremely high positions in Zero Wing. These 2 women were none other than Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo. When Melody saw the commotion Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo caused just with their appearance alone, she could not help but marvel at the situation. She had only become acquainted with Thoughtful Rain after helping the woman in a neutral map. She had recognized Thoughtful Rain's strength and had thought of poaching the woman into 9th Heaven. However, looking at it now, she found the idea laughable. "Rain, what did your guild leader say?" Melody anxiously asked as the woman approached. "Big Sis Melody, don't worry. I've already talked to the guild leader. He says he is willing to hear you out," Thoughtful Rain said, smiling. "The guild leader is waiting for you in his office right now. I'll bring you to him." "Your guild leader is willing to talk?" Melody released a sigh of relief. Now that she understood how powerful Zero Wing was, she knew that it would be very difficult to secure a meeting with its guild leader, especially since her guild was merely an up-and-coming second-rate guild. Before seeking Thoughtful Rain's help, she had sought aid from several first-rate guilds, but when they had learned that her request was related to the Death God workshop, they had even refused to meet with her, much less negotiate. Only the Setting Sun Guild had been willing to hear her out. As the players in line watched, Thoughtful Rain led the 9th Heaven trio into Zero Wing's guild hall. The guild hall bustled with activity. Many of the guild's experts had returned to the residence in anticipation for the Otherworld gates opening. Currently, over 200 Tier 2 experts loitered around the first-floor hall, stupefying Melody and her companions. Zero Wing's Tier 2 experts easily outnumbered 9th Heavens by many times. Moreover, this was only a portion of the guild's Tier 2 experts. Even first-rate guilds paled in comparison to Zero Wing. After a short moment, the group arrived before the guild leader's office on the guild hall's top floor. Currently, several dozen Tier 2 experts sat outside of the office, every one of which was level 56 or higher. These experts were all from the various adventurer teams applying to join Zero Wing. They would all be top-ranked players in any first-rate guild, but they sat quietly as if waiting for some kind of judgment. The hallway was deathly silent. However, Thoughtful Rain ignored these people as she led Melody's group into the guild leader's office. When Melody and the others entered the office, they felt an oppressive sensation overcome their bodies. This sensation didn't originate from Sherfong, who sat behind an office desk, but from Kola and the others, who stood near their guild leader. When they saw Kola and his companions' levels, Melody's group was speechless. Including Kola, 4 of these people had reached level 60, while the rest were level 59. Right now, even the highest level player in Forest City was only level 58. You're here. Rain has already told me about your situation. Zero Wing can help you with your problem, but in return, Zero Wing wants 2 shops in Forest City's central district. What are your thoughts on this condition? Sherfong said when he saw Melody entering the room. 2 central district shops? Melody breathed a sigh of relief when she heard this. She had been afraid that Sherfong would try to take advantage of their predicament and rip them off, but he had simply asked for 1 more shop than she had initially prepared. That won't be a problem. However, may I know when Guild Leader Black Flame intends to deal with the matter regarding the Death God Workshop? If the situation dragged on for too long, Ninth Heaven's losses would become increasingly severe. Unfortunately, dealing with an organization like the Death God Workshop wasn't easy. Preparations had to be made. If Sherfong could give her a time frame, she would have an easier time coordinating with his guild. Once we sign a contract, I'll send Kola's group with you to Forest City to deal with the issue, Sherfong responded. Just them? One-armed Rashoman's eyes widened in shock when he heard Sherfeng's plan. Turning to Kola and the others, he could not help but feel that Sherfong was taking them too lightly. Either that, or he had no idea of the Death God Workshop's strength. The Death God Workshop had several hundred members, and every one of them was an expert. Moreover, the workshop constantly employed hit-and-run tactics, making its movements unpredictable. Stopping the Death God Workshop with only the several players in Kola's party would be impossible. If the matter had been that simple, Ninth Heaven could have resolved it without help. Guild Leader Black Flame, the Death God Workshop is quite powerful, adept at using guerrilla warfare against guilds. Even superpowers have to tolerate their antics. With so few people, I'm afraid that. Melody tried to warn Sherfong. Relax. Kola's group will be enough. If it isn't, I'll find another way to deal with this problem, Sherfong said, chuckling. If you have no other concerns, let's sign the contract. Melody could not help but sigh at Sherfeng's response, but since he had agreed to help, demanding too much wouldn't benefit her. She could only see how this played out if the problem persisted. Zero Wing would dispatch more experts to deal with the Death God Workshop. Chapter 1918 Fairy Country. Chapter 1918 Fairy Country. Once Sherfong and Melody had signed their contract, Kola and Fire Dance, whom Sherfong had tasked with leading a 20-man team, followed Melody's group to Forest City. When Sherfong had finished with the situation regarding Ninth Heaven, he selected a few adventurer teams to annex into Zero Wing. These adventurer teams had been relatively powerful during his previous life, although they had yet to reach their full potential. Fortunately, their experts were no weaker than those in large guilds. They only lacked resources and combat experience. Among the adventurer teams that had applied, the Purple Thorns Kingdom's Unbounded had truly surprised Sherfong. Even now, Unbounded ranked among the top 100 adventurer teams in its kingdom. Stubborn Bone, Unbounded's commander, had also been quite famous in the past. Not only had he developed Unbounded into a top adventurer team, but he had also become a Tier 4 berserker himself. Unfortunately, due to a lack of equipment, he had never reached Tier 5. There was also another Unbounded member who had reached Tier 4, the Archlight Sword Emperor, 7 Light. Although 7 Light had been slightly weaker than Stubborn Bone, the difference hadn't been related to their technique standards, but due to a lack of proper equipment and weapons. Meanwhile, due to the fact that Unbounded had 2 Tier 4 expert members, it had barely qualified as a top adventurer team in the Secret Pavilion's eyes. Even so, the feat was impressive. After all, top adventurer teams that earned the Secret Pavilion's recognition could even rival the best second-rate guilds, with some of the more powerful teams rivaling first-rate guilds. Now that Zero Wing had annexed Unbounded, This had guaranteed that Zero Wing would have 2 more peak experts in the future. Moreover, since Unbounded had focused its development in the Purple Thorns Kingdom, the adventurer team had established a foundation in the kingdom. After annexing Unbounded, Zero Wing would have more influence in the kingdom, which would, in turn, make it easier to obtain resources unique to the kingdom. After Sherfone finished selecting adventurer teams, he made his way to the Candlelight trading firm and started to mass-produce all-round devices. He also instructed Melancholic Smile to arrange the production of advanced darkness resistance potions in preparation for his expedition to Kama Island. Meanwhile, in the second-floor hall of Zero Wing's Guild Hall, when the various adventurer team representatives waiting in the hall saw Aqua Rose, they all could not help but grow nervous. After researching your adventurer teams, we have decided that we will only fully welcome the teams on this list. For those not listed, Zero Wing will accept a portion of your members, Aqua Rose said as she passed the list to the various adventurer teams present. Also, every adventurer team that agrees to join will receive 20 internal member slots in Zero Wing. If you agree to these conditions, you may see me to sign a contract, becoming one of our guild members. Currently, more than 60 adventurer teams were interested in joining Zero Wing, but the guild could only afford to recruit a limited number of players. If Zero Wing recruited too many, it would only hinder the guild's development. Hence, including the adventurer teams Sherfone had handpicked, Aqua Rose had only decided to allow 11 adventurer teams to join Zero Wing, all of which had relatively strong Tier 2 experts and resources that would be crucial to Zero Wing's development. After checking the list, some of the adventurer teams celebrated, while others were frustrated. "Commander, this is great! Our adventurer team can join Zero Wing as a whole!" Seven Light exclaimed after reading the list. After witnessing Sherfeng's fight with the evil dragon, his desire to join the guild had grown. Despite being at a disadvantage in terms of strength and speed, Sherfeng had relied on his extraordinary techniques to render the evil dragon powerless. He had been utterly mesmerized. When he thought about how he might be able to seek guidance from Sherfeng after joining the guild, he couldn't help his excitement. "Good! For now, I'll go and apply to form a 1,000-man legion with Zero Wing while you head back and prepare our players to migrate to Zero Wing City. From now on, we'll operate out of this city." Stubborn Bone was just as elated. Even before applying to join Zero Wing, he had heard that Zero Wing offered amazing benefits to its players. When he had stepped into Zero Wing's residence, he had learned that the reality was even better than the rumors. Not only did Zero Wing's members have priority when using the Battle Arena's combat rooms, but they could also rent advanced combat rooms in exchange for GCPs. As long as they had enough GCPs, they could even learn all kinds of combat techniques. However, what surprised him the most was Zero Wing's guild warehouse. There were even level 55 and 60 dark gold weapons and equipment available for purchase. Of course, guild members had to have enough GCPs and sufficient status to buy these items. Only core members were allowed access to top-tier items. Even so, elite members could purchase level 55 and 60 fine gold weapons and equipment. Moreover, Zero Wing's members had a variety of methods to earn money. Not only were a ton of high-ranked quests available in the guild's various residences, but there were also plenty of guild transportation quests available in Silverwing City. These guild transportation quests awarded far better remuneration than the transportation firm's quests for non-guild members. With all of these resources, Stubborn Bone even had hope of becoming a peak expert in God's domain. However, he wanted to get Unbounded's members settled in Zero Wing City first. Then, he would do everything he could to raise his position in the guild. He could only secure more resources to grow by doing so. All of the adventurer teams that joined Zero Wing would start as normal members, and commanders were no exception. Meanwhile, in the Fairy Country, a neutral map far away from Star Moon Kingdom, under Melody's lead, Cola and the others finally arrived at the Fairy Country's Forest City. This place is so prosperous. It seems like there are so many more players here than in Star Moon City. Shadow Sword was a little surprised to see half-beastmen and half-elves filling the streets. Fire Dance and the others nodded in agreement. In their opinion, very few players should choose to play as a neutral race, but Forest City streets were packed. Moreover, all of these players were very high-leveled, with most having passed level 55. Many of them had even reached level 57, which only expert players could do at this stage of the game. In fact, Forest City likely had more level 57 players than Zero Wing City. Forest City is the fairy country's capital. 1/3 of the country's half-beastmen and half-elves are here. Although it can't compare to an empire's imperial capital, it's more prosperous than an ordinary kingdom's capital. Fairy country is a hub for players seeking individual strength. Players come here from various kingdoms and empires. If you gather all these players in a single location, it is only natural that you'd get a frightening number. Moreover, more players continue to flood into the city. This is why so many large guilds have set their sights on the fairy country. Some guilds have even converted all of their players into neutral races. Melody explained. There are as many as 5 first-rate guilds operating in Forest City, and everyone is competing over the position as the city's overlord. 5 first-rate guilds are competing over the city? Fire Dance was astonished. During the game's early stages, the competition in Star Moon Kingdom had been intense, but only 3 first-rate guilds had participated. However, 5 first-rate guilds fought over this single NPC city. Of course, Fire Dance recognized Forest City's value. Not long after Melody introduced Fire Dance and her team to the mesmerizing Forest City, she received a message. As she read it, Melody's expression darkened. Has something happened? Fire Dance asked when she noticed the change. I've just received a report stating that the Death God Workshop has taken action yet again. Just some time ago, the workshop ambushed one of our 1,000-man teams while it raided a field boss. Melody said grimly. The Death God Workshop? Hearing Melody's words, a joyful smile lit up Fire Dance's face as she asked, Can you take us there now? Now? Melody was stunned for a moment. We're pretty far from the ambush site. By the time we arrive, they will be gone. Moreover, the Death God Workshop only dispatched a 100-man team this time, and every member is an expert. With just the 20 of you, I'm afraid that. It's fine. Just lead us there to take a look. Fire Dance gently demanded with a calm smile. Chapter 1919 Battlefield of Monsters. Chapter 1919 Battlefield of Monsters. Hearing Fire Dance's confident tone, Melody sent one-armed Rashomon to organize a team. While she understood that Fire Dance and the others were extraordinarily strong, the Death God Workshop was not a simple opponent otherwise. Forest City's various first-rate guilds wouldn't have such a massive headache over the workshop. It should be known that the Death God Workshop had ambushed those guilds' teams many times, but the workshop's members were quite cunning. Despite doing all they could to retaliate, their efforts had been wasted on a few small fries. They couldn't reach the Death God Workshop's core. This was also why only the super first-rate guild, Setting Sun, of all the guilds she had reached out to, had been willing to help them. However, the Setting Sun's price was just vicious. Accepting Setting Sun's offer was no different than giving the guild, which she had gone to great lengths to develop, away. She would never agree to such a thing. Meanwhile, with how many members the Death God Workshop had mobilized to ambush Ninth Heaven's 1,000-man team, they'd suffer a massive loss if Fire Dance and her companions actually found the workshop's members. Hence, as a precaution, she had decided to take some of her people along. She couldn't afford to let Fire Dance and the others die so soon after reaching Forest City. It would be hard to explain to Zero Wing. Due to time constraints, one-armed Rashomon was only able to gather a little over 200 experts from the guild before Melody led Fire Dance and the team to Wisp Cemetery, a level 60 to 75 map some distance from Forest City. Dark clouds covered the sky above Wisp Cemetery throughout the year, and although lush forest occupied the area, it gave off an oppressive and gloomy aura. However, since this was a high-resource map, many guilds often grinded and collected resources here. Melody and her group carefully advanced down a forest path as they made their way towards the reported battlefield. Although not many monsters called Wisp Cemetery home, the wandering wisps in the area were incredibly troublesome. Once they spotted living creatures, they'd call upon a small force of undead creatures to eliminate the intruders. These little monsters could easily summon hundreds and thousands of undead creatures with its call. To make matters worse, not only did the undead creatures provide very little EXP, but they also almost never dropped good items. As a result, players grinding in the Wisp Cemetery tried to avoid the wandering wisps and undead creatures as often as possible. After traveling through the Wisp Cemetery for about half an hour, Melody's group finally reached the ambush site. The Death God Workshop had ambushed Ninth Heaven's players at the entrance of an underground tomb. The tomb contained a level 63 field boss, and the Death God Workshop had killed both Ninth Heaven's members and the field boss during its ambush. Traces of combat were evident in and outside of the tomb. It was clear that the recent battle had been intense. Players' blood had been scattered across the ground, filling the air with its stench. They must have executed the ambush during the boss fight. They must have stationed some players outside of the tomb to stop anyone from escaping. Were there any survivors from the 1,000-man team? Thoughtful Rain turned to ask Melody after observing the bloodstains. Not one person managed to escape. The Death God Workshop always operates this way. Whenever the workshop launches an ambush, it uses a magic scroll to seal the area, preventing players from using instantaneous movement scrolls and return scrolls, Melody said, gnashing her teeth. Although the ambush team wasn't the guild's main force, it was an elite team led by expert players. Losing the entire team had incurred significant losses. Not only had every player died, but they had also all lost a piece of equipment. The lost weapons and equipment were far more of a problem than the lost levels. Big Sis Fire, too much time has passed since the end of the battle. The players from the workshop have already left the area, and their tracks have faded. I'm afraid that chasing after them is impossible, Flying Shadow said after getting no results from his tracking skill. Your Tier 1 tracking skill isn't enough. Fortunately, I recently learned Mana Perception, a rare Tier 2 tracking skill. I can now perceive traces that aren't visible to the naked eye. To put it simply, I can see the mana fluctuations players leave behind. It's been less than 3 hours since the battle ended, so the Death God Workshop players are still within my perception range. Not even a Tier 1 anti-tracking skill will have any effect against my skill, Fire Dance said, smiling faintly. Why else do you think the guild leader sent me? Hearing Fire Dance's words, Flying Shadow grew a little excited. He had thought this job would be difficult, but it seemed that they'd be able to complete the task quickly with Fire Dance's new skill. Fire Dance then proceeded to use Mana Perception, tracking the ambushing players. If the Death God Workshop members had used a return scroll to leave the area, she wouldn't have been able to track them. However, she'd find them as long as they simply walked away. These people haven't left using a return scroll. After lingering here for some time, they headed north, Fire Dance said as she watched the mana fluctuations lead into the forest. Hurriedly, she said, they only left about an hour ago. We still have hope of catching up to them. Let's move out. Saying so, Fire Dance took the lead and followed the mana fluctuations with her teammates close behind. She found them? Melody could not help her growing excitement. Hurriedly, she and the 200+ experts from her guild followed after Fire Dance. She had never thought that Fire Dance was so amazing to locate a trail that was more than an hour old. Ordinary tracking skills were impressive enough if they could find 30-minute-old traces. If the target had an anti-tracking skill, finding them would be even more difficult. After following the trail for about half an hour, the group finally arrived before an ancient temple nestled in a thick grove of trees. At a glance, over 500 players were gathered before the temple's entrance. However, these players were a part of two different groups, a 60-man team and a 500-man team. All of the 500 wore uniform equipment of relatively high quality, and they were all level 56 or above. This was obviously a guild team. Huh! Isn't that East Crow's troubled madness? Melody, who had hidden behind a tree, wondered aloud when she saw a righteous man among the 500-man team. The man wore aqua-blue mage robes and held a staff embedded with 3 resplendent gemstones. Why is he here? Troubled Madness was a vice guild leader from East Crow, a first-rate guild. In terms of individual strength, he ranked among the top in his guild. He was also one of the top-ranking elementalists in Forest City, and he wasn't any weaker than she was. East Crow's 500-man team had surrounded the Death God Workshop's 60 members. It was evident that East Crow had located the troublesome players before her group. How fortunate. I had never thought that I'd get to meet two of the Death God Workshop's famous commanders, Frost Rain and Chopped Axe, at the same time. You have been challenging to track down. Now, it's time to pay for your past transgressions. Troubled Madness snarled as he glared at a man and a woman amidst the Death God Workshop's group. The middle-aged man that had a scholarly look was a level 58, Tier 2 swordsman, while the tall woman exuding a wild aura was a level 58, Tier 2 berserker. Frost, what do you think we did to East Crow? The tall woman asked as she considered the situation. It seemed as if she were trying to remember what she had done to this first-rate guild. I don't remember. We've done a lot of things. There's no way I can remember everything. Since we can't remember, it shouldn't have been important. Frost Rain, the scholarly man, said with a wave of his hand, expressing his lack of concern over such trivial matters. A mere workshop dares to mock East Crow? We already have you surrounded. None of you should think of leaving this place alive. Troubled Madness bellowed in rage. East Crow's other members went into a frenzy, killing intent flooding from them as they charged at the Death God Workshop players. The workshop's players had previously killed their guild leader in the fields and stole an important epic weapon, yet they acted as if the incident meant nothing. Why wouldn't this enrage East Crow's players? Countless spells and arrows rained down on the Death God Workshop's members as East Crow's MTs and melee players tightened their circle. All of these guild players were experts, and their coordination was seamless. After so much talk, you still attack us? Chopped Axe, the tall woman, exclaimed. I haven't had my fill yet, so let's see how far you East Crow players can go. After saying so, Chopped Axe charged into the shrinking wall of players. Frost Rain, however, showed no interest in the battle. He yawned with boredom, further inciting guild players' fury. The MTs and melee players on the front line began to employ their specialty moves, meeting Chopped Axe in battle. Elated, Chopped Axe raised the excessively large axe in her hands and brandished it at the approaching players. Pun! 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 As the two sides clashed, the level 56+ shield warriors, guardian knights, berserkers, swordsmen, and assassins were sent flying, their HPs plummeting. Not even their healers could keep up with the damage. In less than 30 seconds, Chopped Axe had carved a hole in East Crow's encirclement. Seeing this, the Death God Workshop members surged through the gap and assaulted the guild's ranged players. In less than a minute after the battle had begun, only half of East Crow's 500-man team remained alive, yet the workshop's team had only suffered a few casualties. The guild players' screams filled the battlefield, and to make matters worse, not a single player lasted more than 5 moves against Chopped Axe. Even Tier 2 MTs fell after 4 of her attacks. She was unstoppable on the battlefield. Is she a monster? Troubled Madness was dazed as he watched the woman's rampant slaughter, his fighting spirit fizzling out. How boring! You're giving up already? Chopped Axe clicked her tongue when she noticed the fear in Troubled Madness's eyes, clearly disappointed. All right, Axe, that's enough. We don't have time to play with these people. We need to get into the temple quickly. Frost Rain, who hadn't made a single move, reminded his comrade as he gestured to the temple before him. He completely ignored the 200+ East Crow members that were still alive. Chapter 1920 Zero Wing vs. Death God. Chapter 1920 Zero Wing vs. Death God. As Troubled Madness and the other East Crow members lost their fighting spirit, they started to pull away from the Death God Workshop's team, trying to avoid the axe-wielding Chopped Axe in particular. Fear overwhelmed the guild players. No matter how they looked at it, this one-sided battle felt like a nightmare. They were all experts from East Crow, a first-rate guild, but they were nothing more than powerless children before the workshop's players. If they retold this tale in Forest City, no one would believe them. As neutral race players, their Tier 2 promotion quests were more difficult than human players. Of course, after completing their Tier 2 promotion, their racial traits were boosted, as well. They were even stronger than ordinary Tier 2 classes. But despite so many Tier 2 players on their team, they had no hope of resisting Chopped Axe. Moreover, the female berserker hadn't used a single skill, relying on her techniques in this battle. As East Crow's members retreated, Death God Workshop's members lost interest in the fight. They didn't even bother to chase down the guild players. Instead, they turned and walked toward the temple. "Vice Guild Leader, what should we do?" A Tier 2 cleric asked Troubled Madness when he realized that the workshop's players were ignoring their guild. "There's nothing we can do. These people are monsters. Chopped Axe, in particular, has the strength of a 1,000-man legion. We have no chance against her. Most likely, only Setting Sun, which is interested in Forest City, can stop them now," Troubled Madness said as he balled his fists, fear and frustration filling his heart. Although he was a powerful expert, he could only take on 24 experts at the same time. Against a 100-man expert team, even he would have to flee. In contrast, Chopped Axe had just rendered a 500 expert team powerless. With such strength, it would take 1,000 experts to defeat the woman. In other words, Chopped Axe had the strength to single-handedly change the outcome of a battle of several thousand players. Be an absolute nightmare in the fields. Meanwhile, Melody and the other Ninth Heaven members wore grim expressions after watching the battle from their hiding spot in the forest near the temple. "How can the Death God Workshop have such a powerful expert?" Melody watched Chopped Axe in a daze. Although the Death God Workshop members her guild had encountered were impressive, there hadn't been anyone as strong as Chopped Axe among the group. East Crow's experts were much stronger than independent experts, and while independent players would be considered experts after reaching the early stage of the Trial Tower's 5th floor, East Crow's experts had reached the 5th floor's late stage at the very least. And still, those experts were helpless against Chopped Axe. Although she had brought a little over 200 guild experts with her, these players' overall strength couldn't compare to Troubled Madness's 500-man team. Moreover, Troubled Madness was just as strong as she was. "So, they're the Death God Workshop's members?" Fire Dance asked Melody. They are." Melody nodded. "It seems this trip wasn't a complete waste of time after all," Fire Dance said as she watched the group of players approach the mysterious temple. She then turned to her guildmates and announced, "All right, time to get to work." Saying so, Fire Dance emerged from the grove of trees and approached the players from the Death God Workshop. "We're getting to work." Cola and the other Zero Wing members grinned before following after Fire Dance. "What are you doing?" Melody's anxiety peaked as she watched Fire Dance and her companions leave their hiding place. "Didn't you just see how powerful those players are? With our current team, we won't even serve as a warm-up. We should return and organize a stronger team." The Death God Workshop's commanders were its strongest players. She had assumed that while these commanders might be strong, they shouldn't be much stronger than the workshop's other players, but it seemed that she had been gravely mistaken. Moreover, this Death God Workshop team was led by 2 commander-level existences. When she considered the possibility of the scholarly man, Frost Rain, being as powerful as Chopped Axe, she shuddered. Fighting the 2 Death God Workshop commanders at the same time would be suicidal. However, despite Melody's advice, Fire Dance stepped out of the forest's cover as if she hadn't heard Melody at all. "Guild Leader, what should we do?" Scarlet Heart asked nervously. "We have no choice. We have to follow them. We are responsible for requesting Zero Wing's help. We can't sit here and do nothing while they fight." Melody sighed as she and her guild members followed Zero Wing's team. The temple's entrance was an empty clearing, void of any obstructions. The moment Fire Dance and her team appeared, they attracted the attention of East Crow's members. "Who are they?" "Huh! They're human! Why are humans here?" East Crow's members softly discussed the approaching players. Aside from merchant players, human players were rare in the fairy country. Naturally, spotting a group of 20 human players would be odd. Shortly after Zero Wings members left the forest, Ninth Heaven's players revealed themselves. Since Ninth Heaven was a local first-rate guild, East Crow's members recognized the expert players, especially Melody. For a time, a commotion erupted among East Crow's members. What is Ninth Heaven's guild leader doing here? Did she come to take revenge for the Death God Workshop's recent ambush? That shouldn't be the case, right? Didn't she see the fight just now? Even with our numbers, we were no match. And she only has around 200 experts with her. With so few players, they won't even be a warm-up for Chopped Axe. They must have missed it. Why else would they make such a foolish move? East Crow's members were shocked as they watched Ninth Heaven's team approach the Death God Workshop members. They could not figure out what Melody was trying to do. Troubled Madness agreed that Melody must have lost her mind. Even if she hadn't seen the battle, she should at least notice the corpses littering the clearing. Oh? Aren't you from Ninth Heaven? Chopped Axe recognized Melody's group immediately. Smiling, she asked, "What? You want revenge for the trash we killed just now? Feel free to try. I can use this chance to stretch before going into the temple. Guild leader Melody, don't mind Chopped Axe. She is just joking. Don't take her seriously." Frost Rain, who stood beside Chopped Axe, said, smiling at Melody, "If Ninth Heaven is willing to hand the item over, the Death God Workshop will stop targeting your members. I hope that you have carefully considered the matter. Don't even think about it. I will never hand it over to you." Melody growled, rage burning in her gaze. "It seems guild leader Melody still doesn't understand us. Since you're here, then, I'll show you the difference between us personally," Frost Rain said. Turning to his team members, he said, "Go. Remove these players, but leave guild leader Melody alive." Hearing Frost Rain's command, the several dozen Death God Workshop members pounced on Ninth Heaven's members like wild beasts. They treated the 200-plus experts before them like prey awaiting slaughter. "Everyone, prepare for battle. Do not fight alone," Melody said, her expression grim as she glared at the 50-plus players charging towards her. Although these Death God Workshop members were not as monstrous as Chopped Axe, they were extraordinarily powerful. She knew from watching the previous battle that they were far stronger than ordinary experts. Just before the workshop's players reached Ninth Heaven's members, a black-clad figure appeared before one of the level 57, Tier 2 Guardian Knights leading the charge. This figure then transformed into a shadow as it pierced through the Guardian Knight. Without time to utter a scream, the Tier 2 Guardian Knight collapsed to the ground, his HP bar drained to nothing. The workshop's players slid to a halt after seeing the shocking attack, turning towards the figure. "Who are you?" the Death God Workshop members demanded as they watched the figure, afraid. "I am Zero Wings Fire Dance." Fire Dance introduced herself as she sheathed 1,000 transformations. Sweeping a glance over the Death God Workshop's members, she calmly stated, "I'm here to bury you." Chapter 1921 Duel of Strength. Chapter 1921 Duel of Strength. The Death God Workshop's members shot Fire Dance chilling expressions after hearing her statement. "You're here to bury us? How bold! This woman must be dreaming." Although Fire Dance's level 60 was surprising, a 2 or 3 level difference was nothing to experts like them. They were merely on alert due to her successfully ambushing and killing a Tier 2 metric tons. However, Fire Dance was dearly mistaken if she thought that she could slay them all. Several melee experts immediately charged at the assassin, striking with axes, spears, and great swords simultaneously. These experts' coordination blocked all paths of retreat available. However, Fire Dance did not remain idle. Unsheathing 1,000 transformations once more, she met the approaching weapons with her fragmented legendary sword. When the weapons collided, something astonishing occurred. The impact threw the several charging melee players, and despite all of them being Tier 2 experts, they felt their arms numb from the force, their weapons trembling violently. How can an assassin have so much strength? The several Death God Workshop members that had attacked stared at Fire Dance as she charged towards them in horror. Their movements were still stiff, so their mobility was limited. They couldn't even defend themselves. Realizing that something was amiss, the workshop's ranged players hurriedly launched attacks at the darting assassin. Countless spells and arrows rained down on Fire Dance, covering enough area that she couldn't avoid all of the attacks in time. However, just before the attack struck Fire Dance, a giant of a figure appeared before her. It was none other than Kola, who was more than eager to join the fray. With his shield raised, a barrier of light formed before him, preventing any ranged attacks from reaching his comrade. Even after taking a beating from the ranged attacks, the light barrier remained intact. Meanwhile, Fire Dance arrived before the several stiffened melee players. Executing Absolute Strike and Shadow Turmoil, she killed 2 of them instantly. This turn of events made the Death God Workshop members frown deeply. When Fire Dance had ambushed and killed the Tier 2 metric tons, they hadn't gotten a clear view of the assassin's combat standards, but after this clash, they knew that both Fire Dance and Kola were extremely powerful experts. Their grasp on timing and their coordination were incredible. So strong! Troubled Madness, who watched the battle from a safe distance, gasped when Fire Dance had instantly eliminated 2 players. After fighting the Death God Workshop earlier, he had learned how powerful the workshop's Tier 2 experts were. Even in a one-on-one, he was not confident of defeating those experts decisively, let alone several of them at once. It seems you're not all talk after all. I finally get to have some fun. Chopped Axe licked the corner of her lips before raising her gigantic battle axe and charging at the human assassin. Although Chopped Axe was a berserker, her movement speed was even higher than ordinary assassins. Fully displaying the benefit of being a tigerkin, she left afterimages wherever she passed. By the time Fire Dance had killed her 4th Death God Workshop member, Chopped Axe had appeared before the female assassin. Raising her battle axe with a single hand, she sent a powerful chop at Fire Dance. As the weapon descended, space around its blade showed faint signs of crumbling. Tier 2 skill, Spatial Quake. Not only did Spatial Quake temporarily increase her strength, but it also dealt damage in a 5 by 15 yard area before her. It was one of the few AoE skills the Berserker class possessed. Not one to fall behind, Fire Dance used the Tier 2 skill, Shadow Edge. Unlike the earlier clashes, either player had been thrown when Fire Dance's short sword met Chopped Axe's colossal weapon. However, the resulting impact was so powerful that space around them cracked. The women looked at each other in astonishment. How is this possible? How can a human assassin have so much strength? I'm a tigerkin, for God's sake. This berserker's strength is actually a match for mine? The outcome even surprised the Death God Workshop's Frost Rain and Zero Wings members. Chopped Axe was a tigerkin. Her body's innate strength far surpassed that of a human. She had also learned super rare passive skills and wielded a special legacy. Moreover, her weapon was an epic battle axe. Her strength was even unrivaled within the Death God Workshop. The unexpected outcome put Chopped Axe in a very bad mood. She, someone famed for her strength, had failed to defeat a human assassin in a duel of the attribute. This was unforgivable. As for Kola and the others, they were fully aware of just how powerful Fire Dance was. Not only did she wear multiple pieces of epic equipment, but she also wielded 1,000 transformations. Since Kola had his own fragmented legendary item, he could guess that her short sword was the same rank. If that were the case, only Sherfong and Gentle Snow could likely surpass Fire Dance's strength. Yet, despite being so powerful, Fire Dance's clash with the Tigerkin Berserker had ended in a tie. While everyone was still shocked by the collision, neither Fire Dance nor Chopped Axe gave their opponent an opportunity, as they continued to launch frenzied attacks. For a time, afterimages of Fire Dance's short sword and Chopped Axe's axe filled the battlefield. Chopped Axe had better techniques than Fire Dance, and it was evident that she had reached the flowing water realm. She could perceive Fire Dance's attacks as soon as the human assassin began to execute them. However, Fire Dance was an assassin. Strength wasn't her forte. Her true power lay in her speed, so even though the Berserker could read her movements, she still had an advantage with her movement speed, making up for her weaker combat standard. Despite such a thrilling battle, where her life would be forfeit if she made a single mistake, Fire Dance very much enjoyed this moment. Throughout this battle, she recognized many of her deficiencies and perfected her techniques. Fortunately, the same could not be said for Chopped Axe. She could only watch, displeased, as the human assassin continued to improve as they dueled. You dare use me as a grinding stone? Do you think I will give you enough time to grow stronger? Chopped Axe immediately activated her berserk skill, Savage God's power, her muscles rapidly expanding. In the blink of an eye, she transformed into a 3-meter-tall giant. At the same time, an extra crimson battle axe had appeared in her hand, radiating waves of bone-chilling mana. You are the first person in the fairy country to force me to use this move. Now go to hell! Chopped Axe then swung her blades in a powerful downward slash towards Fire Dance. Tier 2 Taboo's skill, Meteoric Annihilation. Suddenly, over a dozen crimson axes descended from the sky, each carrying the weight of a mountain. In response, Fire Dance activated Power of Darkness before brandishing 1,000 transformations, sending countless water whips at the falling axe blades. Domain skill, Water Binding. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.